Okay, back again. I'm sorry if I'm a little out of breath. I just had to run up and down the basement stairs a couple times to get some housekeeping out of the way, but all is good. So, Chapter 10. The decision to notify Congress on October 28. In this chapter, we address Comey's decision to send a letter to Congress on October 28, 2016 about the emails discovered on the Wiener laptop. Comey made the decision to send the letter on October 27, following the briefing he received from the Midyear team that morning. Check something here real fast. Okay. In Section 1 of this chapter, we address various factors that Comey and others in the FBI said they considered with respect to the decision to make the disclosure. In Section 2, we compare, I can't see really well for some reason, my eyes are blurry. I can't imagine why. In Section 2, we compare the decision to notify Congress about the Midyear investigation with the way in which the Russia and Clinton Foundation investigations were handled. In Section 3, we discuss certain internal FBI messages about the decision that we discovered in the course of our review. In Section 4, we address the process by which the FBI announced Comey's decision to the department and how the department leadership reacted to his decision. In September 5, again, I gotta clean these, I think. Excuse me a second. They should be pretty clean, but reading section as September, you know something's not quite right. In Section 3, we discuss certain internal FBI messages about the decision that we discovered in the course of our review. In Section 4, we address the process by which the FBI leadership announced Comey's decision to the department and how department leadership reacted to his decision. In Section 5, we discuss how the October 28 letter was drafted, edited, and finalized. In Section 6, we provide our analysis of Comey's decision. Factors considered as part of Comey's decision to notify Congress. The question of whether to notify Congress of the Midyear team's discovery of emails on the Wiener laptop was first raised during the briefing to Comey on the morning of October 27. FBI personnel involved in the decision told us that over the next 24 hours, numerous discussions occurred about whether to notify Congress of this development. Below, we address the various factors relevant to this decision that Comey and others in the FBI told us they considered. A. Belief that failure to disclose would be an act of concealment. Two broad categories of long-standing department and FBI policies, norms, and practices were potentially relevant to the decision to announce the reactivation of Midyear. First, the department and the FBI regularly declined to comment publicly or to Congress regarding ongoing criminal investigative activity. Comey endorsed this principle in general, stating, "I believe very strongly that our rule should be we don't comment on pending investigations." Second, the department has a long-standing practice of avoiding actions that could impact an imminent election, which Comey described as a, quote, very important norm. Comey stated, "I said to the team, here's the way I think about it. I've lived my entire career in the Department of Justice under the norm, the principle that we, if at all possible, avoid taking any action in the run up to an election, avoid taking any action that could have some impact, even if unknown, on an election, whether that's a dog catcher election or a president of the United States." A point that eluded me earlier that I want to bring up now while I'm thinking about it. Comey was never a badge-carrying law enforcement officer in the sense that he was never an FBI agent in the field or a police officer or anything like that. He was a prosecutor, and he made his way up the ranks of the U.S. Attorney's Office to the point where he was assistant or deputy U.S. Attorney, then U.S. Attorney actually, I don't believe he was ever U.S. attorney. He was definitely deputy U.S. attorney, but then he got the job at the FBI. Um, so when you talk about having the mindset of the guy in the street, the average FBI agent who's out there making a living, Comey has no real connection to that. Maybe he's more empathetic than I give him credit for, but I doubt it. He's a lawyer. Comey told us that the circumstances surrounding the discovery of emails on the Wiener laptop did not permit him to conform to these policies and norms, and that, in particular, remaining silent did not appear to be an option. With Comey, remaining silent is never an option. Comey explained, I couldn't see a door. I said to the people inside the organization, I can't see a door labeled no action here. I can only see two doors, and both were actions. One is speak, the other is conceal. Because having testified about this multiple times, like working backwards in September, July, and having spoken about it on July 5th and told Congress, the American people, a material fact which is this is done and there is no there. Now to restart, and not just in a marginal way, in a way where we may have found the missing emails, that to not speak about this would be, in my view, an affirmative act of concealment. And so I said, okay, those are the doors. One says speak, the other says conceal. Let's see what's behind the speak door. It's really bad. We're 11 days from a presidential election. Given the norm I've long operated under, that's really bad. That will bring such a storm. Okay, close that one, really bad. Open the second one, catastrophic. And again, this is something reasonable people can disagree about, but my view was to conceal at that point, given all I had said, would be catastrophic. Not just to the Bureau, but beyond the Bureau, and that as between catastrophic and really bad, that's actually not that hard a choice. I'll take really bad over catastrophic any day. And so I said to the team, welcome to the world of reality, of really bad. Comey testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on May 3rd, 2017, and spoke at length about the Midyear investigation. When talking about the October 28 letter, Comey testified, when the Anthony Weiner thing landed on me on October 27, and there was a huge, this is what people forget, new step to be taken, we may be finding the golden missing emails that would change this case. If I were not to speak about that, it would be a disastrous, catastrophic concealment. I don't know. He had time, after getting the search warrant, to look at those emails before he opened his mouth. He could have waited until after the election, in my opinion, to say what he had found, because if Hillary was found out on those emails to be guilty of concealment, of destruction of emails and all that, then she would have been out, and whoever the idiot was that was her vice presidential candidate would have taken over, and it would have gone from there. There's a order of succession built in to the Constitution for that exact thing. But to say that you had to do something before the election and thereby possibly ruin someone's election chances, which, if you listen to Hillary, Comey was one of the main reasons that she lost, because she has to blame it on somebody. But even if she's right, he didn't have to do that, in my opinion. He could have waited. Once again, I think Comey sets up a false dichotomy here, a false comparison between right and wrong, between catastrophic and really bad. But I'm not an agent. I was never a law enforcement officer. I was never a lawyer. And I'm certainly not an election expert. So take that as you will. Comey testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee on May 3, 2017, and spoke at length about the midyear election. When talking about the October 28 letter, testified, when Anthony Weiner thing landed on me on October 27, and there was a huge, this is what people forget, I already read that, I'm sorry. Perceived obligation to update Congress. Comey told us that he felt he had an obligation to update Congress that the FBI was seeking a search warrant for the Weiner laptop in the mid-year investigation because the email discovery was potentially very significant, and that made Comey's prior testimony longer true. Comey stated, I don't think the obligation was rooted in my having promised to come back to them if I learned some new evidence. I have read some of that in the open source, people saying the reason he did it is that he made a promise to Congress that he would supplement the record. No, I mean, maybe I did in some form, but that's not how I thought about it. I thought my obligation to Congress is, I testified under oath for 10 hours and said that there's no there there, we're done. And now that is materially untrue, and that's the obligation I felt. Well, you don't know it's materially untrue. You just found some emails. You don't know what's in them. Comey stated that his July 5 statement was actually irrelevant to this obligation. Comey told us that the department could never have closed the mid-year investigation with a no comment. Instead, he said that in the absence of his July 5 statement, the department would have to state that it concluded a, quote, fair, honest, and independent, unquote, investigation, and that the investigation was now closed. Comey stated that once the statement was made, in whatever form it came, quote, the decision that came in October was inevitable because of all of a sudden that's not true, end quote. In his testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Comey stated, I've got to tell Congress that we're restarting this, not in some frivolous way, in a hugely significant way. Comey added that everyone on my team agreed we have to tell Congress that we are restarting this in a hugely significant way. Comey added that the significance of the potential evidence on the Wiener laptop was a factor in assessing his obligation to notify Congress and the public. He stated, yeah, so I'm sitting there. It's October 27th, and there's a reasonable likelihood that we are going to find material, one possibility, that will change our view on of the Hillary Clinton case. Two, even if it doesn't, that we know something that is materially different than what the rest of the world knows and has relied upon since I spoke about this. The FBI is done. There is no there there, and that to conceal that, in my view, would be subject the FBI and the Justice Department, frankly more broadly, to a corrosive doubt that you had engineered a cover-up to protect a particular political candidate. So you either covered up to protect a candidate, or you ruined the chances of a candidate and vaulted the other one into a win. Comey, I don't know, maybe he's smart, I don't know. And that especially given your pledges of transparency, not, I don't actually put much stock in the notion that I promised to get back to Congress, but that I had said to everybody, the credibility of the Justice Department enterprise is enhanced by maximal credibility, maximal transparency. I offer that transparency, and then I know something that materially changes that picture, and I hide it. I think the results would be generations-long damage to the credibility of the FBI and the Justice Department. That's what I think about. It's Comey as the savior of the DOJ and the FBI. That's twice now. Comey told us to put aside any hindsight bias about what was actually found on the laptop and, quote, sit with me on October 28th and make this decision. And where you have a reasonable prospect of something that is world-changing with respect to that investigation, then decide whether you speak about it or not. Close quote. Comey emphasized that this was, quote, not just any investigative step. Again, you have to reason to believe that there are hundreds of thousands of germane emails, including which is a very important fact to me, potentially, the missing BlackBerry emails from early in her tenure. He continued, so this isn't a frolic and a detour. It's the reason the department thought we had to get a search warrant. There's potentially highly significant information there. Again, potentially highly significant. You didn't know. We asked other FBI personnel about the nature of this obligation to update Congress. Rybicki told us that Comey felt he had an obligation, quote, to basically supplement the record, unquote, with Congress because he had testified that the investigation was complete. Bowditch told us he thought the obligation grew out of Comey's July 5 press conference. Bowditch stated, the director felt like, hey, if we don't notify them after the July 5th notification, we could potentially be accused of concealing information. I remember him using that word. Steinbach described Comey's decision and his obligation by stating, the overriding question was say nothing and get accused, worst case scenario, of covering up, or be transparent and say we have something, we just don't know what it is, and let the course play out. And I described the director as a very transparent, communicative person. And I want to say that transparent peace is probably weighed on him more than there goes my glasses again, weighed on him more than the not saying anything piece. And I also think his belief that he somehow made that pledge to Congress. The lead analyst stated that at one of the meetings during this period, Comey asked everyone in the room their opinion on whether the FBI had an obligation to notify Congress. When it was his turn, the lead analyst told us, I will never forget what I told him. I said, sir, every instinct in my body tells me we shouldn't do it, but I understand your argument that you have to make a factual representation, a factual correction to Congress to amend essentially what you had told them. Otherwise, because I think that was really where he had coalesced, or the discussion had, that he had made this statement to Congress, and that doing things like serving process is contrary to what he had told Congress, so he felt like he had to correct the record. FBI Attorney 1 told us that an OGC attorney was tasked with researching whether Comey had a legal obligation to correct the record with Congress. FBI Attorney 1 stated, I think what we decided was that he did not make a promise to come back to them, but that the implication was that the investigation was over. We asked FBI Attorney 1 to explain her understanding of Comey's obligation. She stated, I think Baker and the director just believed that yes, the letter of what he said did not say I will come back to you, but they believed that he had an obligation to do so under just general standards of candor, that we had finished the investigation. It was not finished. I just think he felt that what he had said, the impression he had left, because he was the one testifying, was that he would come back to them. And Baker thought that, and Baker agreed with that part, definitely. Baker told us that he believed that he was the person who first raised the issue of Comey's obligation to update Congress. Baker stated that this obligation arose because Comey, quote, told Congress repeatedly this thing is closed, unquote, and had now authorized, quote, a significant step forward in the investigation, unquote. Baker stated that this obligation had nothing to do with the July 5 statement, and it was instead related to Comey's testimony to Congress. Baker stated that even if Comey had not done the July 5 statement, eventually, quote, Comey would have had to go to Congress, talk about the FBI's investigation, talk about our conclusions, say that we agreed or disagreed with the department's decision, and then, having done that, he would have been in the soup in the same way at the end of October. Baker told the OIG that he believed that the perceived need to notify Congress was the overriding factor that drove the decision-making. Anderson told us that she believed Comey needed to supplement his testimony to Congress because it, quote, was such a significant issue, unquote, that, quote, it would have been misleading by omission, unquote. Anderson stated that even though Comey did not explicitly tell Congress he would update them, it was, quote, implied, unquote, in, quote, his testimony overall, unquote. Avoiding the perception that the FBI concealed the new information to help Clinton win the election. Comey told us that he was concerned that if the FBI failed to disclose the new information, it could be accused of attempting to help Clinton get elected. He stated that to conceal that, in my view, would subject the FBI and the Justice Department, frankly more broadly, to a corrosive doubt that you had engineered a cover-up to protect a particular political candidate. Baker also expressed this concern. He stated, not to notify Congress is an action because it also potentially could have an impact on the election. So, for example, imagine we don't say anything. We push past the election, and then we announce that, well, by the way, we've authorized a search warrant, and we found all these emails. Let's imagine, right? Because we don't know what the facts are. We find all these emails. You guys have probably heard the story, but I'll just say it again. And it turns out that, oh my God, there were more classified emails of a different type where there's clear evidence that she knew what she was doing. It kind of pushes us from the probable cause thing up to beyond a reasonable doubt. And now we're going to change our view, charging her. If she's been elected President of the United States, then Donald Trump would say, oh my God, these people knew this beforehand and didn't say anything. This is a rigged system. Again, you hadn't investigated the emails yet. You cannot say it's a foregone conclusion that by researching them you would have found all of this damaging information. It's just not the case. You had an option to wait until after the election. You really did. These people intentionally hid that until after the election so that they could get her elected and thwart me. Steinbach also stated a similar concern. He stated, I think weighing on everyone's mind is if we get through this and a week after the general election we find relevant material, the Congress and the American public will never allow the FBI to live that down. You clearly hid this from the American public, and you knew you had something, yet you waited until after she became president before you disclosed that you found something relevant. This was one course of action. The other course of action is we state it and get accused of influencing the election beforehand. Steinbach continued, we felt that, again, the Congress, the American people, would never be able to say, FBI, you withheld this. The last thing we wanted to have happen was, hey, I wouldn't have voted for her if I had known this. And so that was weighing on our minds. We wanted there to be transparency, both in November as well as in July. Hey, here's the set of facts. Here's the good and the bad. You, and again, I think there's somebody, many feel that it's not your job, but I think the discussion items were lay out the facts and let the people decide for themselves. And that, and maybe not in those exact words, that was the theme through the course of this. Steinbach told us that he did not recall if Comey, quote, said it in exactly these words, but in the totality, that's what he conveyed to us, unquote. Steinbach added that Comey, quote, wanted to be transparent, unquote. 1. Protecting the reputation of the FBI. Several witnesses articulated a concern that failing to disclose the decision to seek the search warrant would injure the reputation of the FBI, a concern that, as discussed above, was closely related to avoiding the perception that the FBI was hiding the information to help Clinton. No one said you had to avoid getting the search warrant. Bowditch stated, I know Comey really felt hung out there with Congress, and he was so worried about the institution getting hurt. He didn't. He knew it was a bad situation, but the institution getting hurt by thoughts of us concealing this information. FBI Attorney 1 told us that the team, quote-unquote, certainly considered what would happen if the FBI chose not to disclose this information to Congress and the information became known after the election. She stated that would have had a much more significant impact on the reputation of the FBI because the FBI would have been accused of, quote, somehow hiding, unquote, that information from Congress. We pointed out to FBI Attorney 1 that the FBI's standard practice is not to release information on investigations and asked her if not sending the letter would have simply been consistent with standard practice. She responded, it would be, except we had already released information. And that's what I said about maybe I would have done something differently on the July 5th statement. We had already released all of the information and said, this is what we're doing. This is what we've decided. And then to then go back to the same stuff and leave everyone with the impression that that's what we decided, and then a week later everybody finds out that we had reopened this investigation, I think that would have been much more detrimental to the FBI's reputation and to the Justice Department's reputation. Protecting the legitimacy of a Clinton presidency. Comey told us that he was concerned about the perceived illegitimacy of a Clinton presidency that would follow from a failure to make the October 28 disclosure. Comey said, I don't remember thinking this explicitly, but I'm sure I was operating in an environment where she was going to be the next president, and I was in a position to have her be an illegitimate president the moment she was elected because I would have concealed a material development in her investigation. And the moment she took office, the FBI is dead, the Department of Justice is dead, and she's dead as president. FBI Attorney 1 expressed similar concerns to us, but said she did not express them at the time. FBI Attorney 1 stated, I also think it would have been detrimental. I was careful not to discuss this, but in my mind it was detrimental. If Secretary Clinton was elected president then, it would have come out. It would have definitely come out that we had done the search warrant. And then it would have been for an illegitimate, like it would have been grounds for, you couldn't have elected her. She was under investigation. All of those sorts of things that would have had more of an impact if you didn't say anything. Concerns about the electoral impact of the announcement. Comey told us that he decided at the time that he would not consider who would be helped or hurt by making public the reactivation of the Midyear investigation. Comey stated, I will not engage in the exercise of figuring out who will be helped, who will be hurt, which way this will cut, who will play it, because then I'm starting to make judgments based on political calculation. Dude, that's what all of your judgments are. Instead, I should think about what is the right thing to do given the circumstance in which we find ourselves. where I've made material representations and what is the best thing for justice institution to do given that, without regard to what may happen, so consciously I did not. Comey described the debate within the FBI about the congressional notification as, quote, a family conversation, unquote, where everyone was free to state their opinions and concerns. Comey specifically told us of a concern expressed by Anderson during this conversation. Comey stated, one important part of the family conversation about whether to send the October 28th letter with Jim Baker knew from his conversations with Tricia Anderson that one of her concerns was how should we think about the fact that this might hurt Hillary Clinton and help elect another candidate, that kind of thing. And Baker said we should raise it with the director, and that's the kind of stuff he wants you to raise, and I gather he thought she might not raise it. So at our next family discussion that evening, he said, let me ask you a contrarian question. How do you think about this? And then I think she spoke herself and said, how do you think about the fact that you might be helping elect Donald Trump? And I said, I cannot consider that at all. Down that path lies the death of the FBI, because if I ever start thinking about whose political ox will be cored by this or that, who will be hurt or helped, then we are done as an independent force in American life, and so I appreciate you raising it. I cannot consider it. And I was very glad she raised it because it was probably a question that was looming in lots of people's minds, and I think my answer was the right answer. Well, yeah, you would. So you maybe ruined Hillary's chance to be president, and then you tried to ruin Trump's presidency by your insistence to not tell people that he was not part of the Russia Gate investigation, that he was not under investigation. So, it's all about you, Comey. It's all about you. Anderson stated that she did not remember exactly what she articulated in the discussions about the letter, but she told us that she had a conversation with Baker prior to the final meeting with Comey on the morning of October 28. Anderson stated, I do remember saying more explicitly to Jim Baker that I was worried that what we're doing is going to have an impact on the election. Was that appropriate for the Bureau? Was that, I was concerned about that for us as an institution. And at least that was how we were going to be perceived. The FBI was going to be perceived as having impacted the outcome of the election. And and sort of tied to that, we reached the threshold, that it was essential that we send this letter. And this is where, my concerns about materiality and sort of fairness to the former secretary, played in. In the light of the fact that we're going to be perceived to be affecting the outcome of the election, is there really enough here to warrant us doing that? Anderson stated that the Baker first raised Anderson's concerns to Comey during the October 28 morning meeting and, quote, kind of put Anderson on the hot seat. Anderson stated that she articulated her views to Comey and told him, I'm not so certain that this is the right thing to do. Anderson told us that a robust discussion ensued. Anderson stated she did not recall either candidate being mentioned by name in this discussion and said any discussion of impact on the election, quote, certainly would not have been couched in terms of helping or hurting either candidate. Anderson added that it would have been highly inappropriate for there to be any partisan, motive or interest in influencing the outcome of the election. Anderson stated, I don't know that I walked away from the meeting feeling, totally convinced that it was the right thing to do, but I also understood why the other options were worse. Excuse me. Close this. Rather, I asked Comey whether we should take into account that sending the letter might have an impact on the outcome of the election or could be perceived as having such an impact. I stated that I had concerns about our actions having such an impact, particularly given that it was unclear and perhaps even unlikely that the emails would be material to the investigation. I also recall raising a concern about it being unfair to the former secretary in a sort of due process sense, because no matter how carefully we wrote such a letter, the importance of the emails would be overinflated and misunderstood. So in my mind, and what I believe I argued in the meeting, was that we were about to do something that could have a very significant impact on the outside world, even though what we had might not be material, yet people would very likely view it as such. We asked Baker about Anderson's concerns. Baker told us that Anderson came to him the morning of October 28 and stated, "I've thought about this overnight. I have serious reservations about going down this road. I'm very concerned about this, Jim." Why? Well, because I'm concerned that we're going to interject ourselves into this process. We're going to interject ourselves into the election in a way that potentially, or almost certainly, will change the outcome. And I, Tricia, am quite concerned about that. And I'm concerned about us being responsible for getting Donald Trump elected. Baker stated that Anderson was worried about, quote, putting the thumb on the scale, unquote, in a way, quote, that is going to hurt one candidate and benefit another right before the election, unquote. Baker told us that he asked Anderson if she wanted to bring this up with Comey, but Baker stated that she was reticent to do so. Baker said that he brought the issue up with Comey during the meeting that morning in order to make sure Anderson's concern was brought to Comey's attention without attributing it to her. Baker stated that Anderson then chimed in and elaborated on her concerns once he raised the issue. Baker told us that Comey responded, quote, along the lines of like, we can't think that way, we just can't think that way. FBI Attorney 1 told us that she recalled others expressing, quote, concern about what impact this would have on the election, unquote. Specifically, FBI Attorney 1 stated that she spoke directly with Anderson about these concerns, which they both shared. She said that Anderson spoke to Baker about this concern, and Baker raised it at one of the group meetings. FBI Attorney 1 stated, as I was going through this, I was thinking I should not be bringing politics into this, and so I was trying to be careful about thinking about this in an apolitical way and not raising the concern as who is going to get elected, because that actually is not something that I thought we should be considering as the Bureau. I thought that up with Tricia because she and I, were close and we talked about it. But I did not, I don't think anyone brought up the outcome on the election. We talked about the policy, about, that making an announcement is so close in time to the election, but we didn't bring up the fact that if you do this, Trump will get elected sort of question, because I don't know that anyone thought it was an appropriate thing to bring up. FBI Attorney 1 told us that this issue was raised by Comey in the context of having an undue influence on the election, rather than the potential impact of the decision in an electoral sense. FBI Attorney 1 stated that Comey recognized the concern, but Comey framed the issue in terms of, quote, what was our obligation to Congress and to the people to do the right thing, unquote. FBI Attorney 1 reiterated that although the issue was discussed in terms of the proximity to the election, quote, we did not discuss, but if you say this, then Trump will get elected. Like, we did not in any way talk about it in those stark of terms, so at least not in the as the group decision. We asked other participants in the discussion about Anderson's comments. Rybecki stated that Anderson raised a concern that the notification to Congress, quote, could help candidate Trump at that point. Strzok told us that someone commented that the letter, quote, might influence the ultimate outcome of the election, unquote. Bowditch stated that Anderson made an argument against the letter, but he told us that he could not recall what that argument was. Memories like sieves. Expectation that Clinton would be elected president. Comey told us that, like the rest of the world, he assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to be elected president. When asked whether this had an impact on his decision to notify Congress, he stated, I think none, and I tried very hard to be both that and maybe convince myself on that. I've often asked myself, so were you influenced in any way by the knowledge what the polls were showing? Not consciously, and in fact, I tried to be very conscious about saying, I don't give a rip. I don't care. But if if anything, I suppose like if it's unconscious, I may have been consoled that it wasn't going to make any difference anyway. I don't remember thinking that consciously, but the environment which I was operating, well, I don't want to psychoanalyze myself too much more, not consciously is the honest answer. When asked if his decision would have been the same if Clinton were expected to if Clinton was expected to lose by 20 points, he stated, that's a reasonable question. I think I would have said still, If you conceal something, maybe this matter wouldn't have been of such intense interest if she was down 20 points all summer long or something. But a matter of intense public interest and debate that, and people have relied upon your credible investigations and your word here, even if it was foreordained that she was going to lose the election. I think to hide that would have subjected this institution to justifiable withering criticism. In a subsequent OIG review, Comey stated, I am sure I was influenced by the tacit assumption that Hillary Clinton was sure to be the next president. We asked Baker if anyone raised the issue of Clinton being up in the polls and likely to win the election no matter what the FBI did. Baker said that this issue definitely came up, and somebody said something along those lines. Baker stated, there was some discussion about if we do this and she wins, then nobody can allege that it was rigged system and things had been hidden to try to benefit her. Somebody may have said that in context, well, she's ahead in the polls anyway, and I think that's probably what's going to happen, and so on and so on. So yes, I think that aspect of it came up and added, it could have been the director, but I don't specifically remember. Belief that email review could not be completed before the election. Each of the participants in the FBI discussions to seek the search warrant told us that no one expected the review of the Weiner laptop to be completed prior to the election. Comey told us that this fact, the Midyear team did not expect to finish the review of the Weiner laptop prior to the election, quote, was a really important fact for me, unquote, in making the decision whether to make the October 28 announcement. Comey stated that he asked the Midyear team directly during these discussions if they could, quote, finish the review before the election. Comey said that the team told him, quote, there's absolutely no way we'll get that done before the election. It will be a long time after the election. When asked why he did not just assign 30,000 people to review the laptop, Comey stated, yeah, I could have, but I actually raised this and their answer was, the review has to be done by people that don't understand the context. If we bring in a class out of Quantico, it doesn't do us any good because the quality of the work will be such that we can't rely on. It's not like searching a field for a bullet fragment. We have to put eyes on them to understand this. We asked Comey if his decision to notify Congress would have been different if the team told him they could finish the review prior to the election. Comey stated, maybe, yeah. If they could tell me, high confidence that this is something we can knock out in a week, maybe, yeah, maybe. But I do think it was an important consideration that we're about to undertake something of indefinite duration, and so I think maybe, I'm not certain that it would make it differently, but I would have waited probably differently. Wow. I would have waited probably differently. If it was October 3rd and they said, we think there may be something here and we can knock it out in the next 6 days, I might have. Then it's interesting. I hadn't thought about this, but then I might have been on to considering the prospect of a leak, because I might have said, not going to do it, but what would be the effect on the department if there's a leak about the search warrant? Yeah. Comey later added the ultimate impact on his decision. Comey later added that the ultimate impact on his decision would have depended upon how high a confidence read they could give me that it'll be finished far enough in advance of the election to responsibly report a result. Comey reiterated, if I had known the information or even a reasonable facsimile of the information that I was given on the 27th, 3 weeks earlier, I'm highly confident I would have said, let's get a search warrant, and then we would have had a conversation about how soon you can finish and whether there was a prospect of finishing this before the election. I still would have had a very hard decision to make, but I would have been making it 3 weeks earlier. I don't know whether it could have led to a different place, but I certainly would have wanted it to have wanted to have the option to be there and to consider whether, let's make it up, 3 weeks of time, does that make me think differently about the choice between speak or conceal? Is there a reasonable prospect I could run this out and have a conclusion far enough in advance of the election that if it changes the FBI's view, I could still, you'd have to go through all that decision tree. But I don't know it would have put us in a different place but I would have wanted to have the opportunity. Fear that the information would be leaked. We asked the FBI personnel involved in these discussions if a fear of leaks impacted the decision to notify Congress. Comey told us that he didn't make this decision because he thought it would leak otherwise. Comey stated that he thought that would be a cowardly way to make a decision. Nevertheless, Comey told us, I kind of consoled myself that this was a hard call and you're going to get the crap beat out of you for it, but it would have come out anyway. He reiterated, however, I don't want to leave you with the impression that I sent the letter to Congress because I thought it was going to leak otherwise. Others, however, had a different recollection. Rybicki told us that, while not remembering the context, he recalled the issue of leaks being raised during these discussions. Strzok stated that the fear of leaks played a role in the ultimate decision. Strzok explained that the decision to seek a search warrant for the Wiener laptop was known to many people beyond the Midyear team, and this raised a concern that the information could leak. Draft talking points that were circulated to FBI senior management on October 31 regarding the decision to send the letter to Congress, which incorporated comments by Strzok, the lead analyst, and Page, included the following bullet point. It's important to note that I was notified Congress before moving forward with additional investigative steps in this investigation because of my commitment to transparency and because I wanted Congress, to hear it from me first. Emphasis in the original. Page told us that her, quote, personal belief, unquote, was that there was a, quote, substantial and legitimate fear that when we went to seek the warrant in order to get access to the Wiener laptop, that the fact of that would leak, unquote. Page said that this concern related to the suspicion that NYO personnel had been leaking negative Clinton Foundation stories. Bowditch Anderson and FBI Attorney 1 told us that they did not recall a discussion of leaks during the debates about notifying Congress. Baker told us that a concern about leaks played a role in the decision to send the letter to Congress. Baker said, we are quite confident that somebody up there is going to leak this fact, that we have all these emails, that if we don't put out a letter, somebody is going to leak it. That definitely was discussed. If we don't do a letter, it's either going to be leaked before or after the election, and we either find something or we don't. And either way, there's going to be claims that we tried to play games with the election, and we tried to steer it in a certain way to help Hillary Clinton and hurt Donald Trump. We're not about that. We're not making decisions on the basis of which candidate we like or don't like. We're not going to do this. And so we are just going to have to ignore all that and do what we think is right, consistent with our obligations to Congress. Baker told us that, quote, the discussion with somebody in New York will leak this, unquote. Baker continued, quote, what we discussed was the possibility that we go forward with the search warrant and take that step. That's a step being taken in the Hillary Clinton investigation, and that's what will leak, Baker explained. The sense was that the significance of a step is not going to go unnoticed, and if we don't put something out, somebody will leak it. That's just what we talked about. Comparison to other ongoing investigations. In this section, we addressed the Russia and Clinton Foundation investigations, both of which were ongoing in October 2016. Comey and other witnesses told us that these investigations were not discussed during deliberations regarding whether to announce to Congress the reactivation of the Midyear investigation. The differential treatment of the Russia investigation. On March 20, 2017, Comey testified before Congress that the FBI began an investigation in late July 2016 into, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, including, quote, investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts. You're next, Mueller. Despite the existence of this investigation into individuals associated with the Trump campaign in the fall of 2016, none of the participants in the FBI's internal discussions about the October 28 notification to Congress recalled any mention of the Russia investigation. Excuse me. We asked Comey whether the existence of investigations into individuals affiliated with the Trump campaign impacted his consideration as to whether to send the October 28 notification to Congress regarding Clinton. Comey told us that you've got to look at each case individually, and stated that comparing those investigations, quote, is a calculation you shouldn't engage in because then you're starting to weigh political impacts of your work. Who's hurt by this? Who's hurt by that? Comey explained. Well, I don't think, and I shouldn't think of them in relation to each other. I should look at a case involving a John Smith, and given our norms and rules around that, I don't see, and I don't think the department sees, a reason for treating those cases as exceptions the way we did the Hillary Clinton case. Sorry, I just kind of passed out for a moment. The whole world knew we were doing it, right? The candidate and her campaign themselves had talked about the review, the security inquiry. We know the government is working on this. The referral had been public, so all of that, to my mind, puts us in a different position. And counterintelligence investigations are very different, and for all the reasons you can imagine, we are very, very careful about, because we don't want the adversary, who's not necessarily the subject, but is the nation state, to know what we're doing or who we may have thought of to focus on. So there it would take even more to be the exception to the rule, as I just look at. I couldn't look at them in relation to each other, but if I found another case where I and the department thought that made sense to make an exception, we would. Comey was asked during testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee on May 3, 2017, if it was quote-unquote appropriate for Comey to comment on the Midyear investigation repeatedly and, quote, not say anything, unquote, about the investigation involving, quote, the Trump campaign's connections to Russia. Comey replied, I think I treated both investigations consistently under the same principles. People forget that we would not confirm the existence of the Hillary email investigation until 3 months after it began, even though it began with a public referral and the candidate herself talked about it. I wonder who that is. Whether to make the public aware of the more general issue of Russian interference in the U.S. presidential election also arose in the fall of 2016. On October 6th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint statement about election security. This statement was not drafted in connection with the FBI's Russia investigation, but Comey's reaction to it is highly relevant. The statement begins, the U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including those from U.S. political organizations. The statement then described the nature of these compromises and urged states and local election officials to be vigilant. Excuse me. As a member of the USIC, the FBI was consulted on this statement. Comey told us that he decided the FBI should not be included in the statement because he felt it conflicted with the long-standing Department of Justice norm, quote, that we, if at all possible, avoid taking any action in the run-up to an election, avoid taking any action that could have some impact, even if unknown, on an election. Comey continued. It was actually that norm that drove me to say the FBI should not be putting out a statement earlier in October about the Russian hacking that I had advocated inside the U.S. government. In fact, I drafted an op-ed from my own name in August to call out the Russians, to say, here's what they are doing in our election. And our awesome interagency system kicked that around, and then come October, there is a discussion about making a public statement about the Russians. And I said my view is that the goal of a public statement is to inoculate the American people against what the Russians are doing. I think the inoculate goals have been by and largely achieved because of all the press reporting on it. You had legislators talking about it. I said so, there's only a marginal increase in the inoculation by an official statement from the FBI. and given that we are now a month from a presidential election, from an election, I think we can reasonably avoid that action. And so I said, I don't think the FBI should put out such a statement. It's too late. That if we need to do it, we should have done it by then, and that's just how long I've operated. In an October 5th, 2016 email, Comey explained his position on the statement to Central Intelligence Agency Director John Brennan and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, three of the most consummate liars to ever draw a GS paycheck. Comey stated in part, I think the window has closed on the opportunity for an official statement with the 4 weeks until a presidential election. I think the marginal incremental disruption inoculation impact of the statement would be hugely outweighed by the damage to the intelligence community's reputation for independence. I guess it's still too early to tell, but I think you kind of did the damage. I could be wrong, and frequently am, but Americans already, quote, know, unquote, the Russians are monkeying around on behalf of one candidate. No, you pretended that they were monkeying around with one candidate. You never proved it. Our confirming it adds little to the public mix, begs difficult questions about both how we know that and what we are going to do about it, and 3, exposes us to serious accusations of launching our own October surprise. The last bit is utterly untrue, but a reality in our poisonous atmosphere. The differential treatment of the Clinton Foundation investigation. In 2016, the FBI had an open investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Comey refused to confirm the existence of the investigation on July 7, 2016, in testimony before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee because the investigation was not public. In addition, numerous witnesses told us that agents involved in the Clinton Foundation investigation were instructed to take no overt investigative steps prior to the election. We asked Yates about this instruction. Yates stated, yeah, I think there was a discussion about, look, if agents on the Clinton Foundation investigation want to go do record stuff and stuff that you can do covertly, fine, but not overtly. And the sort of thought being, we'll address that again at the end of after the election was over. Yates explained that this instruction was explicit because the department does, quote, everything it can to avoid having an impact on an election. Yates continued, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the actions that we take at DOJ can have an unintended impact on an election, and so that you do everything you can do to avoid that. Like if somebody wants to send you a criminal referral, we generally don't initiate an investigation until after the election. So it's, sort of basic DOJ practice that I don't think anybody would dispute, that you can do everything you can to avoid having an impact on an election. And the Bureau never pushed back on that concept, and that actually came up with in the connection with Paul Manafort. And they had an investigation on Manafort, and I had a lengthy discussion with McCabe, at least one, maybe more, about how important it was at that time that our investigation not be overt, and what the Bureau was doing with respect to Manafort, because that could impact Trump even though he was no longer his campaign manager. That unless there is something of record that they really needed to do, because they were getting records and doing that kind of, unless there was something they really needed to do overt, they really needed to stay under the radar screen, because it's not fair to impact an election. Excuse me a second, I gotta stretch my neck. Ooh, that popped nicely. Axelrod echoed this point, stating that DOJ's policy, procedure, and tradition is to avoid overt investigative steps in, quote, the run-up to an election, unquote. Axelrod continued, quote, and this policy had actually been cited to the Bureau on other investigations during this election cycle, unquote, including the Clinton Foundation and Manafort investigations. We asked Comey about the different instructions given to the Midyear investigation and the Clinton Foundation investigation. Comey told us, quote, the principle is take no action if it can be reasonably avoided, and there was nothing about the Clinton Foundation investigation that was time sensitive. Comey continued, the challenge of the discovery of the emails on the Wiener thing was, given the context that we had told the world, we the Justice Department and the FBI, that there was nothing there to now be presented with all these emails that are highly significant to that investigation. How is, where the door is labeled no action, that you either speak or you conceal. And so either one's an action, so which action should we take? So it was very different, given the context, a very different posture than the Clinton Foundation. And my worry was I have to be careful that people in New York aren't, by virtue of political enthusiasm, trying to take action that will generate the noise that we will have an impact on the election. No time sensitivity whatsoever to that. Internal FBI discussions regarding the decision to notify Congress. McCabe, Strzok, and Page text messages on October 27. I have to have a drink before I do this. We reviewed text messages from Strzok, Page, and McCabe that indicated their disagreement with Comey's decision to notify Congress on October 28. At 4:03 p.m. on October 27, Page sent a text message to Strzok that stated, "Please, let's figure out what it is we have first. What if we can't make it out? What if we can't make out probable cause? Then we have no further investigative step." Strzok replied, "Agreed." At 9:57 p.m. on October 27, McCabe sent a text message to Page that stated in part, "Baker says his meetings were mostly about the notification and statement which the boss wants to send tomorrow. I do not agree with the timing, but he is insistent." Page responded, "For what it's worth, I also wildly disagree that we need to notify before we even know what the plan is. If we can't get in, then no investigative step has been taken. Whatever. I hope you can get some rest tonight." We asked Strzok about his text message exchange with Page. Strzok stated that there was a, quote, vigorous, healthy debate, unquote, within the FBI about whether the notification to Congress was a good idea, and Strzok told us that he thought the concerns expressed in Page's text message were part of that debate. Strzok told us that he ultimately agreed with Comey's decision to send the letter to Congress. Page told us that she could not remember the context of the text messages with Strzok. Page agreed with the outcome of the message and stated that she did not support Comey's decision to notify Congress. Page added, "We just didn't know what we had yet. It just felt premature to me." Page also stated that there was no guarantee that the FBI would be able to make out probable cause for the search warrant, and she felt it was presumptuous of us to sort of say, "We're reopening, and we're doing this before we have even a search warrant in hand." However, Page told us that she was not involved in the discussions about the letter due to McCabe's recusal. We asked McCabe about this text message exchange with Page. McCabe stated that Baker told him during a phone call that Comey planned to send a letter to Congress. McCabe told us from his perspective, as someone who had not participated in the discussions about the letter, it just seemed like we should have a better understanding of what we had before we make a notification. We also showed these text messages to Comey. Comey stated he did not recall discussing the issue of congressional notification with McCabe. Comey told us that he did not remember hearing Page express those concerns during the debate over the letter, adding, "I think I would remember that." Strzok called with Midyear SSA Agent 1 and Agent 2 on October 28. At 5:21 a.m. on October 28, Page sent a text message to Strzok that stated, "Any plan to tell the case agents, since so much of this has hinged on the credibility of the team," frowny face. At 5:59 a.m., Strzok sent an email to the Midyear SSA and Agents 1 and 2 stating, "Would like to talk to the three of you on a conference call at 6:45. Sorry for late notice." Strzok stated that he reached out to the agents and the SSA on his own and not at Comey's suggestion. Strzok told us that he wanted to make sure the agents and the SSA knew what was happening and he wanted their input. Strzok stated, I think it was, hey, look, we briefed Comey. Our sense is that they wanted to reopen the case and we need to get a warrant to go after it. And they're going to send you a letter? Are you? Objections. Are we horribly off base? Are we not thinking about something? The Midyear SSA told us that Strzok called to inform him of Comey's decision to send the letter and wanted to make sure, quote, the case agents were informed, unquote, as well. The Midyear SSA Agent 1 and Agent 2 told us that they each ultimately agreed with the decisions to seek the search warrant and send the letter. As noted previously, Agent 2 was on the September 29 phone calls with NO about the NYO about the Wiener laptop. Agent 2 told us that around this time was the first he had heard about the Wiener laptop since September 29. Sorry, I was looking at the sent a series of instant messages to other FBI employees about the reactivation of the Midyear investigation. Beginning at 1:46 p.m., Agent 1 exchanged the following messages with Agent 5. This started at 1:46 p.m. and it ended at 1:50 p.m. Agent 5, Jesus Christ, Trump, glad the FBI is fixing horrible mistake on Clinton emails. For fuck's sake. Seen that before. Trump, +0, frowny face, 5th floor. Front 0, frowny face, FBI. Front +0, frowny face, average American public. I'm doing that wrong, but I can't tell what that is. We asked both Agent 1 and Agent 5 about these messages. Agent 1 and Agent 5 both stated the references to 5th floor referred to the location of the FBI's WFO's Counterintelligence Division. Complaining about common topics in leadership and venting. Agent 5 also described this as general complaining to Agent 1 and also as an example of her being, quote, very tired of working, unquote, these type of cases. Agent 1 also sent 2 instant messages about the Wiener laptop to FBI employees not involved in the Midyear investigation. At 2:16 p.m., Agent 1 messaged, yes, it's more email we found through a separate matter. Not sure if they are even unique yet, but we have to make sure. At 2:25 p.m., Agent 1 messaged, emails found through separate matter. Due diligence, my best guess, probably uniques, maybe classified uniques, with none being any different than what we've already seen. We asked Agent 1 about these messages. Agent 1 stated that as of October 28, any information he had about the contents of the Wiener laptop would have come from the discussions with the Midyear SSA. Agent 1 told us he did not recall precisely what he meant by these messages, but that given the seemingly small numbers of Aberdeen Clinton emails the Midyear team had previously found, quote, I thought there was a chance that we would see more emails that we hadn't seen before. We asked Agent 1 to explain his comment about none being any different than what we've already seen, and whether that indicated Agent 1 did not expect to find emails substantively different from what the Midyear team had previously reviewed. Agent 1 responded, maybe, that's right. The classified email was in a similar vein that we saw, similar activities, and similar talking around. Yeah. The FBI informs DOJ leadership about Comey's decision. Department personnel were informed of Comey's decision to notify Congress around midday on October 27. Various discussions between the FBI and department personnel occurred over the next 24 hours. These discussions were at both the Midyear level, the team level, and between Rybicki and Axelrod. Notably, Comey never spoke directly with either Lynch or Yates about the notification. We describe these interactions between the department and the FBI below. FBI and DOJ Midyear team discussions. Strzok stated that FBI personnel assigned to Midyear, quote, had a variety of robust discussions with, quote unquote, department personnel about the letter to Congress. One such discussion occurred on October 27 after Comey had decided that the FBI should seek to review the emails on the Wiener laptop and that Congress should be notified. According to Prosecutor 2 notes, F. Strzok, FBI Attorney 1, and the Midyear Department participated in this decision. And the Midyear SSA from the FBI and Toscas, Laufman, Prosecutor 1 and Prosecutor 2 from the department participated in this discussion. The notes reflect that there was a discussion of whether the decision to review the Aberdeen emails on the Wiener laptop was inconsistent with the Midyear team's investigative approach during the investigation. For example, the notes indicate that Laufman asked, "What distinguishes this from other devices we chose not to obtain?" When think of Aberdeen email, her emails were of less probative significance. The notes reflect that Strzok responded, volume, 500K emails, specifically domains of interest, gap period, first 3 months. Strzok also stated, according to the notes, that, quote, "It is relevant to the Wiener laptop that the Wiener laptop is in our possession." Toscas agreed that possession of the laptop was a relevant factor, stating that if the Midyear team had possessed the laptop during the investigation, it seems like we would have looked at it. Toscas went on to state, according to the notes, "We'll beg the question of why we're not going to ask for all these folks' devices." According to the notes, prosecutors 1 and 2 pointed out that the investigative team did not previously seek to obtain devices from Clinton's senior aides. Regarding a public announcement, the notes reflect that Laufman stated, "Public announcement disproportionate to importance of what we're doing." According to the notes, when Laufman asked whether the department would be shown a copy of FBI announcement in advance, Strzok responded, "I don't know." We asked the department personnel involved in the Midyear investigation about these discussions. The department personnel we interviewed told us they disagreed with Comey's decision to notify Congress and that they communicated that disagreement to the FBI. We summarized their concerns below. Laufman stated that the entire CES team found the notification highly objectionable. Laufman told us his concerns, stating, "A. We had very low expectation that the substance of what the laptop might include would be anything novel or consequential that would occasion reassessing, let alone altering the findings and analysis and recommendations we had already made. B. To the extent that investigative action was necessary to review the data, it's not uncommon for someone for the Bureau to have to nail down something that arises at the end of an investigation, and we ordinarily would forego public comment about that unless and until it's appropriate to say something about the results of that activity. In many instances, it might not be appropriate to say anything publicly about it at all." This is October 28th. We're about a week away from our presidential election, and it particularly struck us as exceptionally inappropriate to make a statement that you reopened this investigation in that close proximity to the day of the election. We asked Laufman what he meant when he said that, quote, "there was a low expectation," unquote, that this evidence would alter the outcome of the Midyear investigation. Laufman stated, "We had seen through our investigation the types of emails that Uma Abedin had been party to, and they were just not the kinds of emails that really went to the core issues that were scheduling under legal analysis, meaning as they had to do with sort of scheduling, and I mean, as important as she is in a personal, confidential assistant manner to the former secretary, she wasn't as substantively engaged, in some matters that would have occasioned access to classified information or dealing with classified issues. So we hadn't seen quite a bit up to that point. And with respect to her, we hadn't seen her engaged via email with anybody on the types of things that were material to our legal analysis. So assuming that what was the syntax sometimes. So assuming that what was going to be reviewed from this new data set was consistent with that, it seemed improbable to us that it was going to change anything. And of course, as we know now, it was a giant nothing burger. Prosecutor 1 stated that the notification to Congress didn't make any sense. Prosecutor 1 told us, I'm sorry, I keep falling asleep between sentences. That's why I keep missing words. Prosecutor 1 told us that given Aberdeen's role and the evidence they had previously reviewed, there was, quote, little likelihood of finding anything of import in there, unquote. Instead of doing a public announcement, Prosecutor 1 stated, we should just investigate it and do it as quickly as we could. We asked Prosecutor 1 about the potential presence of BlackBerry emails from early in Clinton's tenure. Prosecutor 1 stated that the FBI mentioned that there could be information that covered that BlackBerry period from the period at the front end of the tenure, but ended, I feel like a ton of analysis was based upon what could be in there and the opportunity cost of sort of missing out on that. Of course, to me, that's a different analysis than making an announcement about it. We didn't want to be seen in favor of forgoing the effort entirely. Prosecutor 1 stated that the FBI seemed very concerned about transparency with the public and had already kind of decided what they were going to do prior to consulting with the department. Where was I? Oh, Prosecutor 2 told us that the department was shocked that the FBI was even considering notifying Congress about this development. Prosecutor 2 said that she did not necessarily view the Wiener laptop as a significant development in the Midyear investigation. Prosecutor 2 stated, because over the course of this investigation, we haven't sought out personal devices of anybody other than Hillary Clinton. So we haven't asked, for example, for like Uma's personal laptops, her personal Blackberries. We have her state gov stuff, but that's like that of Uma's is all we've searched. So there's a threshold question in my mind of whether, like, this is even something that needs to be searched. And based on the iffiness on that threshold question, and then the likely significance of this device, it seems totally nuts to me that they would make an announcement having no idea what is on this device. Excuse me. Having no idea what is on this device, having not looked at it, and in terms of like the impact that this announcement could have. And I remember being on the phone call like, how are you? Asking like, my God, is she a Valley girl? How on earth are you going to word this announcement so it's accurate and doesn't like, open a much bigger can of worms that is really the significance of the recent finding? I mean, at this point, we have no idea. We just know that like some of Huma's emails are in FBI custody. Like, of course, Uma has other emails like, how is this a game changer? Prosecutor 2 also told us that she believed the FBI would not listen to any of the arguments that they put forth. She stated, there is a defeated feeling at this point that like Strzok was given the task of like pretend to DOJ that you're hearing them out. And he was going to, humor by us having this conference call, but like that for nothing. We said mattered on that call. Again, I fell asleep. Recalling a discussion with Strzok in this time period, Tosca stated, quote, I was really upset and I basically said, this is BS. We don't talk about our stuff publicly. We don't announce things. We do things quietly. Toscas told us that the justification provided by the FBI for why it needed to notify Congress what was called the Comey Rule, meaning a duty to correct the record with Congress because Comey testified to, quote, one thing, unquote, and circumstances have now changed. Toscas told us that, in his opinion, the October 28 letter demonstrated that as soon as you deviate from a normal practice, once, meaning the July 5 statement, you're going to have to adjust to a deviation of all things. Toscas explained. One of the things that I tell people all the time, after having been in the department for almost 24 years now, is I stress to people and to people who work at all levels, the institution has principles, and there's always an urge when something important or different pops up to say we should do it differently or we might want to deviate because this is so different. But the comfort that we set as a people, as lawyers, as representatives, as employees of, sorry, as employees and as an institution, the comfort we get from those institutional policies, protocols, has in an unbelievable thing through whatever storm, whatever storm hits us, when you are within the norm of the way the institution behaves, you can weather any of it because you stand on the principle. That's pretty good. I mean, it was horribly disjointed paragraph, but the end wraps up nicely. And once you deviate, even in a minor way, you're always going to want to deviate. It's always going to be something important and some big deal that makes you think, oh, let's do this a little differently. But once you do that, you have removed yourself from the comfort of saying this institution has a way of doing things, and then every decision is another another ad hoc design that may be informed by our policy and our protocols and principles, but it's never going to be squarely within them. McCord was acting AAG for the National Security Division at this time, and she told us that she thought the notification was, quote, a bad idea, unquote. McCord stated, quote, I believe there were conversations between Toscas and ODAG and the Bureau expressing our view that we should at least get a handle first on whether these are just duplicates, because it could be a big nothing. B. Department and FBI leadership discussions. After deciding on October 27 that he needed to notify Congress, Comey told us that he instructed Rybicki to reach out to the department about the notification. Comey stated that he told Rybicki, I want to tell DOJ that I think I need to inform Congress of this step, and please tell the DAG and the AG I'm happy to speak to them, but that's not what I'm thinking. I welcome their feedback. Comey stated that he did not remember his specific directions to Rybicki, but the substance would have been something like, call Axelrod, tell him where we are, and that I think we have an obligation to notify Congress that we're taking this step. We asked Comey why he decided to seek department's advice we seek the department's advice in October, but not July. Comey stated, I'm not sure. I think given Loretta's position, I thought the July decision I had to do it given where Loretta had landed, and that it was the decision best calculated to protect the department. In this circumstance, I wasn't positive I was right, making a very hard decision. I thought if they want to get involved in this, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I thought it would be a very bad thing if I was, because Loretta might well say, don't do that, and don't do that in July. Here, I guess I thought about it slightly differently. I thought it was a hard call, and if they wanted to weigh in on it, offer their view, we'll take the decision that maybe it was a little less courageous, frankly, than in July. I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe it was a period of having gotten the pain after July, but I'm not sure. I think more about that. I'll think more about that. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's my reaction to it. Comey told us that he did not have any concerns about potential bias when consulting with Lynch on this decision. We asked Comey why that was the case, given the concerns about Lynch that led to his July 5 statement. Comey replied, probably because I saw that reasonable people could see the framing differently than I, in that way. I didn't feel that way with her refusal to step down, the semi-recusal, I think. Okay, I'm going to break here for a second. I'm out of tea. So we'll start with number one, Comey's decision not to engage directly with Lynch or Yates. So let me put up the break screen. Wow, these times are working out really well. It's 30 minutes past the hour. I will drop the stream. I'm not going to drop the stream. I'm going to keep it up. I'm just going to put up the resume sign, and then I will be back at 20 till, or time plus 40. See you then. Okay, I'm back, as you can tell. All right. Point 1. Comey's decision not to engage directly with Lynch or Yates. We asked Comey why he delegated communication with the department to Rybicki instead of talking to Yates and Lynch directly. Excuse me. Comey stated, I think because of the distance they've been taking on the whole thing, I wanted to offer them the opportunity to honestly to step away from it. Then that I wanted to offer them the opportunity, I didn't want to jam them, and I wanted to offer them the opportunity to think about and decide whether they wanted to be engaged in it. Dude, again, judge, jury, and executioner. You're not that person. Just burned my throat. Ouch. Comey emphasized that the reason he had Rybicki reach out to the department was because he, quote, wanted to offer them the opportunity to take this decision, unquote. What the hell does that mean? I don't know. Phone calls between Rybicki and Axelrod. Rybicki stated that he spoke with Axelrod on the afternoon of October 27. Rybicki told us his conversation with Axelrod was twofold and explained. To let him know that the director had decided to authorize the seeking of the search warrant, and there was no real reaction to that from Axelrod. I think he perhaps knew that was coming, or he didn't seem surprised in any way. And then the two was the second part, that the director felt he had the obligation to supplement the record. Axelrod had a very strong reaction. No, we just don't do that, right? We don't do that. Rybicki stated that he and Axelrod had a series of phone calls the rest of the day. After the initial call to Axelrod, Rybicki told us that his understanding was that Axelrod was speaking for both Yates and Lynch in their subsequent calls. We asked Rybicki why Yates did not speak directly. We asked Rybicki why Comey and Yates did not speak directly. Rybicki stated that, quote, he had asked whether they wanted to speak to the director, and Axelrod said no, unquote. Rybicki told us that he asked Axelrod to provide the FBI with any department policy or guidance dealing with investigative activity near an election. Rybicki stated that Axelrod did not believe the congressional notification would technically violate department policy, but was outside of the, quote, the normal coast, unquote. Rybicki told us that he explained Comey's thinking to Axelrod, stating that Comey, quote, felt strongly, unquote, and he felt that he had the obligation, quote unquote, to notify Congress. Axelrod stated that he received a call from Rybicki on October 27, and Rybicki informed him, quote, that the director was intending to send a letter to Congress notifying them, unquote, of the decision to examine the Midyear related emails on the Wiener laptop. Axelrod described his reaction as, quote, surprise, concern, dismay, and stated, I told Rybicki, like in that initial call, look, obviously I'll have to talk to folks here and, call you back. But I said, I will give you my initial reaction, which is that this would be a very bad idea. Contrary to department policies and procedures, both about, taking overt investigative steps so close to an election and talking to the Hill about, investigations, it just struck me as incredibly problematic. Couldn't Comey have, I don't know how this works, I'm just throwing this out there, couldn't Comey have gone to a committee off the record or behind closed doors, not a public meeting, and tell them what was going on? Did it have to be an open letter? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Hey, Harley. Axelrod told us that he and Rybicki talked through it a little bit, and that Rybicki asked Axelrod to send him the relevant department policies. Axelrod told us that told us that he contacted Ray Hulser, then Section T Chief of the department's Public Integrity Section, to get information on the relevant policies. Axelrod stated that Rybicki told him that the director believes he has an obligation to correct a misimpression that Congress has, quote, that the mid-year investigation is concluded. Axelrod told us that this was the key part of their conversation. Axelrod stated that he asked Rybicki where Comey had promised to update Congress, and Rybicki replied that it related more to the, quote, overall tenor, unquote, of Comey's testimony to Congress. Axelrod told us that he tried to convince Rybicki that Comey and the FBI would be better served following department policies and procedures. Axelrod continued, Rybicki never said, look, I don't think that's the policy, or I don't think that's the procedure, or I don't understand. He was all like, yeah, I get all that, but this is different. This is separate. The director has testified. The director believes that Congress now has a misimpression, and so it's the director's, butt on the line, and he needs to do this. And if he doesn't, the concern, it's not survivable for him. We asked Axelrod what he understood Rybicki to mean by the comment that this would not be survivable for Comey. Axelrod stated, I understood that to mean that they thought that the heat the director would get from the Hill, right, so that if this doesn't, he doesn't surface it, and then afterwards when it comes out that the Bureau had this information but kept it quiet, that there would be calls for his resignation, that he wouldn't be able to survive. Well, as it turns out, he only had a few months to live as director, so it was a moot point. Axelrod stated that Rybicki told him that the FBI was also concerned that the information would leak if no notification was made. When you think about it, look at all the screw-ups Comey made in less than a year. He allowed the letter, or the description of the email investigation to be totally watered down in one sense and trashing Clinton in the other, cut out the Department of Justice, winged it on his own, and created an incredible backlash. So then, October comes around, and he decides to announce that he's reopening the mid-year exam investigation. Possibly, I don't know, possibly costs Clinton the election. I don't think so. I think everybody had made up their minds ahead of time who they were going to vote for, and it was just a foregone conclusion. But you could make the case that he lost the election for Hillary. You could make that case. So then, Trump goes into office, and Comey is allowed to be persuaded by, I think it was Brennan, to give President Trump a briefing on the Russia dossier, only talking about the urinating on the bed by the two Russian prostitutes or models, or prostitute models, whatever, with Trump going into the bathroom to scream, I hate black people. He tells Trump about that. So now Trump knows there is an investigation, and Trump even says, hey, don't hold back. If one of my people was involved with the Russians, I want to know, and I want them gone. But Comey let that briefing come out so that CNN could report on it and make the dossier public. Of course, BuzzFeed put it out before then, but CNN was quick on its heels because that briefing gave the Steele dossier legitimacy. So CNN could say, hey, look, see, the president knows about this, so it's got to be something that happened. And they've been running with it ever since. So then Comey decides to let Trump know that Trump isn't on the hook in the investigation, that it's only peripheral people. Trump asks Comey 3 times to tell people Trump's not part of the investigation, he's not a target, and Comey denies him all 3 times. So Comey gets fired. Comey leaks quote-unquote memos that he supposedly wrote after meeting Trump, memos that he never wrote while meeting with Obama, leaks them to a friend who gives them to the New York Times. possibly containing, in fact, definitely containing classified information. That starts the Mueller probe, which is a complete disaster. Just a complete disaster. It hasn't done anything positive yet. I mean, those 13 Russians that they indicted, they were trolls. They were guys who were playing to be um, part of the political process on Facebook, spending tens of thousands of dollars. That's it. Everything else is old or procedure crimes that could even be fought because it seems like those guys were entrapped. So Comey has not done anything right since April of 2016. I'm sorry, since before that, I'm sure. But definitely since April of 2016 when he started drafting the document, pardoning, if you will, Hillary, clearing Hillary of any wrongdoing. Now, according to this document, Hillary didn't do anything wrong that they could prove, although I strongly disagree with that. But anyway, that's where this is going. So Comey was at least right about not proceeding with charges against Hillary insofar as what the OIG says was, that's what I'm looking for, normal procedure. He did some things incorrectly, but not indicting Hillary was not one of them. So Comey is just an idiot. I'm surprised Trump kept him on as long as he did. Axelrod stated that Rybicki told him that the FBI was also concerned that the information would leak if no notification was made. We asked Rybicki if he told Axelrod that failing to notify Congress would not be survivable for Comey. Rybicki told us that he did not, quote, remember using that language, unquote. Rybicki stated, I certainly conveyed how seriously Director Comey felt about it, but I don't recall, the survivability of it. Sitting here, I don't. We also asked Rybicki if he more generally conveyed that there would be, quote, political heat and a call to resign, unquote, if Congress was not notified. Rybicki replied, not that I can recall. I remember telling him the director felt strongly, but I don't remember sort of political heat, calls to resign, just that he felt strongly and that he himself felt he had the obligation. We asked Comey if he expressed concerns at the time about not being able to survive as FBI director if Congress discovered post-election that he had not notified them of this development in the mid-year investigation. As previously noted, Comey stated that it would cause, quote, catastrophic damage, unquote, to the FBI, the department, and to a Clinton presidency. He said that he did not remember expressing his concerns in terms of survivability, but added, I'm sure I said something like, if I chose conceal or speak, I ought to be fired. I ought to be hung out. I would be run out of town because of the damage it will have brought to this. I'm sure I said things like that. Wasn't that run you out of town, Comey? In fact, you haven't been run out of town yet. Perhaps this document will help. We asked others in FBI leadership if they heard Comey state that failing to notify Congress would not be survivable. Bowditch stated he did not recall Comey making that comment, but did remember Comey saying, I am going to take a huge hit on this, but it's the right thing to do. And I remember it struck me that not only was the organization going to take a hit, but I remember him pointing and saying, I am going to suffer personally from this as well, but he felt it was the right decision to make. Anderson stated that Comey viewed sending the letter to Congress as the option that, quote, would do the least damage to the Bureau's long-term credibility and integrity as an institution. For someone who was so concerned about keeping the FBI and DOJ in the good graces of the American public, he sure screwed the pooch. Baker stated, I think Comey may have said, like, I could be impeached, or something along those lines. We asked Baker to explain the context for that remark. Baker stated, It may have been during the meeting, one of the two meetings on the 28th or 27th. Some of the stuff that gets talked about at those meetings, he and I talked about separately later and kind of repeated it. But at some point in time, he raised, I don't remember the context exactly, he raised the issue of, potentially he could get impeached for this if he doesn't tell them this. Baker told us that because Comey had testified under oath, and now that something different has happened, people are going to react to this big time if it was leaked or the FBI told Congress after the election or whatever. Internal department discussions. Axelrod told us that he discussed the congressional notification with both Yates and Lynch. Yates stated that Axelrod told her that he got a call from Rybicki about the director writing a letter to Congress. Yates stated, Rybicki told Axelrod that the director feels like he has a personal ethical obligation because he had told them that the investigation was closed because we had these new emails, and we agreed we should get a search warrant for the emails, by the way. I thought we should. We need to find out what's on there. But that because he had told them that it was a closed investigation, he had a personal obligation to tell them that it was an ethical obligation to tell them that they were now reviewing those new emails. Yates also told us that she remembered, quote, Yates also told us that she remembered being told that FBI doesn't think it's survivable for the director for him not to notify Congress. Yates stated that one of the reasons that the FBI gave for why they felt like Comey had to go to Congress is that they felt confident that the New York field office would leak it and that it would come out regardless of whether he advised Congress or not. Lynch stated that she was told that Axelrod, quote, had gotten a call, unquote, that the Wiener laptop, quote, had potentially relevant emails on it, unquote, and Comey, quote, felt that because of his prior testimony over the summer that he had an obligation to notify Congress of it, unquote. Lynch told us that it was presented to her as the FBI was notifying the department that Comey felt he needed to and had an obligation to make this notification. Lynch stated that this obligation was described to her as an ethical obligation both based on testimony but also as a matter of ethics to notify Congress of new information in this investigation. Lynch told us that she did not recall the FBI asking for the department's feedback. Lynch continued, and then at one point, I think Axelrod relayed information again from Rybicki stating that the director's view was that he had to provide this information to Congress, that he was concerned about the information being leaked from the New York office in even more negative ways, that he was very concerned about that. He expressed that to the FBI, and Rybicki shared that. And he also was concerned that if, in fact, he did not provide this information to Congress, and either it was leaked or later on we discussed it in some department-approved way, that it was not survivable. And that was the phrase that was given to us. And both the DAG and I said, I think we both repeated the same, what do you mean it's not survivable, one of those chorus things. And Axelrod said that that was just the phrase that Rybicki had used. It was not survivable. We certainly took it as coming from the director. I didn't think that he was thinking of the department at large at that point, so we never got, and Axelrod said he did when he heard that he had the exact same question that anybody would have. For whom? But he just got it wouldn't be survivable. Lynch stated that Rybicki's call started a conversation within the department about the department's response. Lynch told us that Axelrod examined Comey's prior testimony and department personnel discussed whether or not that created an obligation. Lynch stated, and my view was, look, you can read it any way you want, but if he's looking at it and saying it does, that's his view. You're not going to change his mind by saying there's another interpretation of this particular statement. That's not the issue. The issue is, should this happen? Should this be done regardless of what's been testified to prior or what's happened? Lynch told us that her view was, quote, let's find out what's on this computer before you start talking about it at all, end quote. Lynch added, even if you view it as I need to say something to Congress, you don't have anything to say at this point. Yates stated that the department began almost nonstop discussion on how to respond to the FBI. Yates told us that, among the factors discussed, were the department's policies, the lack of knowledge about what was actually on the Wiener laptop, and the fact that the department had not yet obtained a search warrant. Yates stated that the FBI did not dispute the department's policies. Instead, Yates stated it all kept coming back to, and it was always framed as this is a personal ethical obligation that Jim Comey has, not a department strategic decision, not a department even policy decision, but a personal ethical obligation that he has. Hot. Decision not to order Comey to stand down. Lynch described the department's decision-making process to us. She stated, "We had a discussion about, well, we needed to make sure that at least it's conveyed that we don't want this letter to go out. We think it's not only against policy, but it's harmful given the calendar, meaning the timing of the election." Lynch stated that there was also some discussion about whether either the DAG or I should call directly to the director and whether or not that was the good idea. Lynch told us that Lynch told us that, quote, the staff's view, unquote, was a direct call from either of them, was not going to change anything based upon the discussions that Axelrod was having with Rebecca. Lynch continued. And ultimately what we decided to do was to continue to have the staff discussions and have Axelrod convey the strong view that neither the DAG nor I felt this letter should go out, and that we thought it was going to cause serious problems. The response we got back was essentially the director heard us, took that into consideration, also took into consideration whoever he was speaking with at the FBI, and was going to send the letter in any event. We asked Lynch why she did not directly order Comey to stand down and not send the letter to Congress. Lynch told us, "I thought about it. I went back and forth on it. And we did in the room. We went back and forth on it. And ultimately, I did have a concern, and we discussed it in the small group also about the perception of the department's leadership trying to somehow prevent information damaging to a candidate from coming out, and that also being a political problem because we also had we talked about it from the sense of, you talk about reopening an investigation into either candidate, whether we had, for example, said something about, the Russian stuff at that point in time. We wouldn't have done that. But the concern of appearing to put a thumb on the scale for a particular candidate was something we were wrestling with. And that's what I was wrestling with, was in fact, if someone comes to you and says, I have a legal, moral, and ethical obligation to do something, this is what I think is right, and then you say, well, you can't do it because of this policy and don't do it, then are you in fact then sort of doing the same thing, only on the other side? And I will tell you, we went back and forth. Certainly I went back and forth and in my mind over what to do as to whether I should not call him directly or have the DAG call him directly first, then have him call me. Either way, should there be a direct call to him. Sorry, that read, I should call him directly or have the DAG call him directly first, then have me call him, not what I said. We asked Lynch to respond to the criticism that she essentially abdicated her responsibility by not ordering Comey to stand down. Lynch responded, I would say I was trying to get him to do the right thing, and I was hoping he would do the right thing, and I would say that you can have that criticism of me if you would like, but I really felt that, frankly, when I say he didn't need me to tell him, I don't mean to say that I had no role in it at all, but this shouldn't have come up. This shouldn't have been an issue. This should not have been something that was being considered. Lynch told us that she went back and forth on whether to order Comey to stand down, but she thought at that point it could lead to greater damage, meaning that Comey would disobey and send the letter anyway. We also asked Yates why she or Lynch did not directly order Comey to stand down and not send the letter to Congress. Yates stated, I certainly discussed it with Loretta. We looked at this and thought, all right. It was not presented to us as, again, Comey's kind of thinking about this, and he's wanting to know what you guys, and I don't mean this to be sarcastic at all, but this was really important on how this was framed. It wasn't, it wasn't as, I believe they mean, he's seeking your view on this, or he's torn and wants to know. It was framed as he feels obligated ethically to do this, and it was like a notification. He feels obligated to do it. That's a difficult situation because, yes, either one of us had the authority to order him not to do it, but you get to play out what happens after that. Let's imagine a scenario here where we order him not to do it. We're then ordering him not to do something he says he feels like he's ethically obligated to do. There are a couple options. He can say, I'm sorry that you're saying that, but I feel ethically obligated and I'm going to do it anyway. So then we're in a scenario where he notifies Congress. He's been telling us it's going to come out because on top of this, I'm ethically obligated to do it, paired with that what it's going to leak out. It's going to come out, and if I don't tell Congress, that's going to put me in a very bad position because they're going to find out anyway, and they're going to find out that I didn't tell them when I should have, and I could have, So we're in a scenario where he says he's ethically obligated to do it. We weren't at all convinced, that he would follow such an order not to do it. If he didn't follow the order, and he did it anyway, and then it comes out that we were ordering him not to do it, that's a very bad position for the Department of Justice. Because then we're telling the director of the FBI not to do something he feels like he's ethically obligated to do. And it takes a bad situation, and it makes it even worse because then you add what we thought would be the perception of a concealment on top of this that we thought would be even worse for DOJ. There's another option there, which is we order him not to do it and he resigns. And then it comes out that that's why he's resigning. That seemed like a very real possibility to us, particularly against the backdrop of the situation with John Ashcroft in the hospital room where he had the resignation letter drafted. There wasn't even an ethical allegation. That was something where he disagreed with them about the statutory authority there. And then it's going to come out. And so then, that is a bad situation for DOJ because it's got the concealment there as well. So we couldn't figure out a scenario that was not going to take a bad situation and make it even worse when we ordered him to do it, when it looked like it had been framed as his personal ethical obligation. And we looked at it from every conceivable angle. Axelrod stated that he participated in discussions with both Yates and Lynch about how to respond to the proposed congressional notification. Axelrod told us that he did not remember anyone advocating that Lynch order Comey not to notify Congress. Axelrod stated that there were 3 possible outcomes, all of which were really bad, should Lynch order Comey not to send the letter. First, Axelrod told us that Comey could obey the order and that, quote, tease up an obstruction of Congress investigation, unquote, of Lynch because she has forbidden Comey from correcting a misimpression to Congress. Second, Axelrod stated that Comey could ignore the order and send the letter anyway, and then you're on the same spot except the FBI director has disobeyed a direct order from the AG, so then you have to fire him. Oh, darn. I'll have to look at that again. You're in the same spot except the FBI director has disobeyed a direct order from the AG, so then you have to fire him. Third, Comey could resign. Axelrod told us none of those are good for the institutions, none of those are good for the policies and the procedures, or the sort of goals of keeping DOJ and FBI out of politics. None of those good for the AG personally. Well, Comey dived into politics real fast after Trump was elected and got burned by it. But I just don't see how you could let him send this letter. Make him resign. And then just show again how much he screwed the pooch by announcing Hillary's not being prosecuted for the things that she did, and show again how stupid of a statement that was, and get on the good side of the news cycle and get them talking bad about Comey. Wouldn't have been that hard. Decision not to engage directly with Comey. We asked Lynch why she or Yates did not contact Comey directly. Lynch stated, "I didn't get the impression that a private conversation was going to get me any more information than we were being given before." Lynch stated that she was surprised that Comey did not contact her or Yates directly, and noted that he had spoken directly to both of them in July. Lynch also stated that Comey set the terms of the conversation by starting it at the Rybicki-Axelrod level. We asked Yates why she or Lynch did not contact Comey directly. Yates stated that the FBI stated to have Rybicki reach out to Axelrod initially, and it was just a notification to Axelrod, Yates continued. Let's see. Rybicki reached out to Axelrod initially, and it was just a notification to Axelrod. Whatever. So we went through the thought process of, is there a viable way to order him not to do it, and we concluded we didn't think that there was, without blowing it up in a much worse way than we were already in. So the second step in the analysis thing is, okay, if we're not going to order him, should Loretta get on the phone with him? Should I get on the phone with him and talk about it? And we went through that analysis and we came out the same place for these reasons. Again, he's not saying this is a strategic or policy question he has. He feels ethically obligated. Both of us have the authority to order him not to do it. So if we call him up, I can't think of a conversation with him about this without telling him I think it would be a huge mistake for him to do this. The feeling was that would be portrayed as that would be portrayed as strong-arming him when you have the authority to be able to tell him not to do it, and you should have this conversation with him saying, I really don't think you should do this. Yates told us that she felt this concern about strong-arming was later borne out in Comey's description of the meeting with Lynch in September 2015 about whether to call the investigation a matter or investigation. Yates continued. And then you layer on top of that this. Strategically based, my interaction with Comey over all of the things, I felt like our best chances at being able to convince him not to do this was going to be from his discussions with his own people. That I had seen in too many meetings, and understand this, that if I had raised an objection to something FBI was doing, that Comey, understandably, was very defensive of his agency, and he would push back hard. I didn't think there was any way in the world he was going to go back to his people and say, I just got off the phone with the AG, or I just got off the phone with the DAG, and they convinced me that I really don't have I really don't have this personal ethical obligation I've told all of you that I have. I felt like strategically the best way to convince him not to do it was going to be to convince his people that he shouldn't do it. And he, in discussions with them, could come to the conclusion because he could change his mind internally. I don't think he would change his mind through a discussion with either one of us. I gotta drink some water. That's still too hot. Yates told us that she considered Rybicki to be his confidant and the person that the department needed to convince to change Comey's mind in this situation. We asked Axelrod, that's not easy, why Lynch did not contact Comey directly. Axelrod stated a direct conversation on the phone could lead to, quote, a misunderstanding, unquote, or the impression that Lynch, quote, was leaning on Comey, unquote. Axelrod specifically highlighted the matter investigation meeting between Comey and Lynch in September 2015 as an example of such a misunderstanding. Axelrod also stated that everyone understood Rybicki to be a proxy for the director. Anderson added, I've thought about this a lot in the aftermath, right? And I've thought if the reaction from Rybicki or the FBI had ever been, oh, we didn't know you guys felt that way, we didn't know what your guys' view was, then I would have been both really disappointed in myself, but also wondered, like, oh well, if only, right? Something got garbled somewhere. If only you know, excuse me, if only you know one of the principals had been able to speak directly to the director, we could have conveyed the message more clearly. I've never heard that, and I don't think that's the case. It was quite clear with Rybicki as to understand what our building's view. It was quite clear with Rybicki as to what our building's view. It was clear that not just Matt Axelrod's view, but the department's view was that the director should not do this. I'm sure that was his takeaway. What I put is this: doing this violates our policies and procedures and traditions. I said repeatedly, this is not only a really bad idea, but it's contrary to how we do business. And actually, I used those exact words as well. It was contrary to how we do business. I apologize for all the stumbling. I'm trying very hard to hit each word. That's why I've slowed down. Comey's reaction to the department's response. Comey stated that Rybicki reported that the department, quote, didn't wish to speak to me, but that their advice would not be able to do it, would be not to do it, and that they didn't think it was necessary, unquote. Comey added that Rybicki told him that the department, quote, recommended against, unquote, the congressional notification and thought it was, quote, a bad idea, unquote. We asked Comey why he asked for the department's feedback and then ignored the feedback that he received. Comey told us, I thought the better view of it was that we had to. They were leaving it to me, essentially, and I took it. I knew that I was alone at that point in time, but my view was, as between these two options, I disagree. Comey emphasized that neither Yates nor Lynch gave him a direct order. Comey continued, I would not have sent it if they had told me not to. Instead, I got this, we recommended against it. We don't think it's consistent with our policy, but it's up to him, was the message conveyed to me. Comey told us that he felt he gave Lynch and Yates the chance to engage, but they didn't wish to participate. It's up to you. Basically, I took it that as, it's up to you. We don't think it's a good idea. We advise against it. I honestly thought they were tasking kind of a coward way out. We asked Comey if anything short of a direct order would have prevented the notification. He stated, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know because I know what argument that I haven't thought of or that hasn't been made or that we didn't make in discussing this they would have made. So I don't know, but so in the absence of that, if they directed me to do it, I would not have done it. He says that. Comey stated that he also thought the October 28 congressional notification was consistent with department policy. He stated, well, department policy is we don't comment on investigations unless there's whatever the exact language is, overriding the public interest. In my view, there was a powerful but bad public interest, I'm reading about lines together. In my view, there was a powerful public interest in that division between speaking and concealing, between really bad and catastrophic. We asked Comey how Lynch or Yates could have ordered him not to send the letter if they understood it to be his personal or ethical obligation to Congress. Comey stated, of course they could. They could say, circumstances where a department lawyer thinks that they need to disclose something in a particular case and their supervisor says, no, we don't do that, and so you have to decide then, do you believe it's reasonable and consistent with the obligations of the lawyer for the United States, or do you believe that your supervisor is doing something unethical, and you have to decide what to do about it? Harley, move. Come on, move. Move. You're not helping. Sorry. Finalizing the FBI's October 28 letter to Congress. After Comey decided to notify Congress, the FBI began discussing internally how that notification should occur. Anderson told us that because the, quote, animating rationale, unquote, behind the notification was to update Comey's prior testimony to Congress, the FBI decided that, quote, a letter to Congress was the right way to go about it, unquote. The letter was transmitted on October 28th. In this section, we discussed the drafting of the letter along with several key edits made during the drafting process. We also described discussions with the department about the letter and Comey's email to all FBI employees. October 28, 2016 letter to Congress. At approximately 11:50 a.m. on October 28, the FBI transmitted the following letter to Congress, which we also provide as Attachment E. In previous congressional testimony, I referred to the fact that the FBI had completed its investigation of former Secretary Clinton's personal email saver. Due to recent developments, I am writing to supplant my previous theory. In connection with an unrelated case, the FBI has learned of the existence of emails that appear to be pertinent to the investigation. I am writing to inform you that the investigation team briefed me on this yesterday, and I agreed that the FBI should take appropriate investigative steps designed to allow investigators to review these emails to determine whether they contain classified information, as well as to assess their importance to our investigation. Although the FBI cannot yet assess whether or not this material may be significant, and I cannot predict how long it will take us to complete this additional work, I believe it is important to update your committees about our efforts in light of my previous testimony. Later that day, after the letter was made public, Clinton's lawyer, David Kendall, contacted Baker to ask about the letter. According to Baker's email to Comey and the Midyear team, during the call, Kendall complained that Comey's, quote, letter was, quote, tantalizingly ambiguous and made statements that were incoherent and highly ominous, such that what we had done was worse than transparency, because it allows people to make whatever they want out of the letter to the prejudice of Secretary Clinton. In the email, Baker stated that he told Kendall that I could not respond to his request at this time. Drafting the letter and key edits. Comey described the drafting of the letter in the following terms. Our goal was to make the disclosure to Congress accurate, fair, and as non-misleading as humanly possible. So we spent a lot of time that night of October 27 on the wordsmithing of that language to give fair notice that we were taking this action, but not to put us in a position where it's wildly overinterpreted one way or the other. And so the next morning, I had finally approved the language. Comey continued, we struggled with the language of it. Everyone talks about my vague letter. Maybe it's vague, but it was structured with great care not to overstate what might be there, or to understate what might be there because I think I said this in the letter. I haven't looked at it in a while. We don't know, but I feel an obligation to say that we're undertaking these new investigative steps. And I think part of the public misconception about it, and I don't know how I would have fixed this, is people have the sense that it was some sort of marginal. Sorry, I just drifted for a second there, as you well noticed. Let me back up a little bit. Maybe it's vague, but it was structured with great care not to overstate what might be there or understate what might be there, because I think I said this in the letter. I haven't looked at it in a while. We don't know, but feel an obligation to say that we're undertaking these new investigative steps. And I think part of the public misconception about it is, and I don't know how I would have fixed this, is people have the sense that it was some sort of marginal lead, that it was a frolic and a detour kind of deal. And I don't know how we could have done that, but maybe we would have been better off if we could have done that. If there was some way to convey, yeah, there would be a real deal here, but then would be unfair because you would be overinterpreting the evidence and overrunning your screen. In his book, Comey discussed the quote-unquote carefully chosen wording of the October 28 letter and why it contained limited content. Comey explained, because we didn't know what we had and what we might find, any further public statement would be inherently limited and misleading and only add confusion and damage to the FBI. FBI Attorney 1 told us that she and Strzok began drafts of the letter to Congress after leaving the initial meeting with Comey on October 27. FBI Attorney 1 stated that she and Strzok combined their drafts and presented the joint draft to Baker. FBI Attorney 1 continued, "We talked to Baker. I remember handwritten edits that Baker put in, which were wordsmithing a lot of. And then it moved to email so that people could circulate it. We identified two significant phrases in the letter that were discussed during the editing process. We discuss each below. Appear to be pertinent. The letter sent to Congress stated that, quote, the FBI has learned of the existence of emails that, quote, appear to be pertinent to the investigation, unquote, and noted that, quote, the FBI cannot yet assess whether or not this material may be significant, close quote. Emphasis added. FBI Attorney 1's first draft stated that the emails may be relevant and noted that at this time, it was impossible to determine if the emails are new or duplicative. Strzok's first draft stated that the emails were related to the FBI's prior investigation of the Clinton email server and noted that, quote, the FBI cannot assess at this time the significance of this material. Various formulations similar to these were discussed before deciding upon the language ultimately used in the letter. FBI Attorney 1 told us that two competing considerations resulted in the language used. On the one hand, FBI Attorney 1 stated that the FBI did not want to undermine the probable cause needed to obtain the search warrants, so we actually looked at emails. On the other hand, FBI Attorney 1 stated that the FBI did not want to overstate what was on the Wiener laptop, and the FBI wanted, quote, to make it clear that even though we were getting a search warrant, that it did not mean there was a smoking gun there, end quote. Anderson echoed this, stating, quote, I was concerned that saying that they were relevant or were pertinent wasn't supported by where we were in the process. In other words, we hadn't put any eyes on any of the emails, so we really didn't know whether what we were going to find, was or wasn't relevant. Pertinent or similar formulations to be too vague and too wishy-washy. Baker stated that he found maybe wishy. Indeed, Baker stated in an email on October 27, 9:51 p.m. to the officials involved in drafting the letter, if everyone wants may be pertinent, then fine. All I am saying is that even if they are all copies of what we already have, they are still pertinent because they are copies and indicate where else the material went and who may have access to it. And if they only may be pertinent, why are we bothering with them and putting out this public statement, which we know will be a big deal? Baker told us that because the FBI was seeking a search warrant for these emails, it was, quote, saying there is probable cause to believe this is evidence of a crime. Therefore, they are pertinent, and we should be willing to make that statement, close quote. Baker said there was, quote-unquote, pushback on the suggestion, as others said, quote, we're not 100% confident that the emails are pertinent. Baker stated that he came up with the appear to be pertinent phrasing, and that seemed to thread the needle and make everyone happy. Briefed me on this yesterday. The letter sent to Congress also stated that, quote, due to recent developments, I am writing to supplement my previous testimony, close quote, and I am writing to inform you that the investigation team briefed me on this yesterday. FBI attorney's first draft stated that the FBI, quote, has recently received emails, unquote, and today the FBI decided to conduct additional investigative steps. Strzok's first draft stated that the FBI recently learned of the potential existence of emails, and earlier today I decided the FBI will take investigative action. The joint draft submitted by the FBI submitted by FBI Attorney 1 and Strzok to the others stated that the FBI, quote, recently learned of the existence of emails, unquote, and Comey decided, quote unquote, earlier today to take investigative action on these emails. In providing comments and edits to the draft letter, Baker stated in an email on the night of October 27, "The institution has known about these for a while, albeit not long, but not yesterday. What happened today was the director's decision." Baker recommended the letter state that, quote, "I decided yesterday," close quote. We asked Baker about this recommendation. Baker stated that he could not recall the decision about this change and also did not remember knowing at the time that Comey had been previously briefed about the Wiener laptop. Discussions about letter with department. The FBI did not share a copy of the draft letter with the department, but rather read the proposed text of the letter to Axelrod and Toscas, during a telephone call. We found that during the call, Axelrod provided feedback regarding the letter, but we did not identify any evidence showing that the FBI accepted his proposed edits. Comey told us that he recalled telling Rebecca, quote, to share the text of the letter with the department, ask for feedback. Comey further stated that it was his understanding that the department provided, quote, a lot of, unquote, of edits to the draft that were accepted. Comey said, "Yeah, I think Matt Axelrod added real value. Yeah, this is my recollection, shaping it in a different way, shortening it at different parts." Rebecca told us that he had discussed the proposed letter with Axelrod and Toscas on the telephone, and we read it to them, and they provided some feedback. Axelrod told us that the FBI never provided the department with a copy of the proposed letter, but stated that he did discuss the contents of the letter with Axelrod and Toscas over the phone, and that he suggested edits to the letter that the FBI did not accept. Axelrod stated, "So that phone call, when they need to read the first sentence, I said to them, to Rebecca and Baker, is my memory of who was on the phone. If that's how you start the letter, the headline is going to be case reopened. We all agree that's not what we're doing. We're not reopening the case, right? Agreement voiced on the phone by FBI, agreement voiced by Toscas. If that's your opening sentence, that's going to be the headline, case reopened. And what you ought to do is telling us that you need to send this letter because the director believes that he's left a misimpression. But if I remember, when I pointed to you the transcript, what he said was, if new information comes to light, I will bring it. We will take a look at it. Why don't you reference that? Explain what you're doing. Don't just make it seem like, you're emailing them out of nowhere. Say I previously testified. I told you that if new information came to light, we would, take a look at it. Some new information has come to light. You're doing exactly what I said, so that was one suggestion we made to them on the phone, which they ignored. A second suggestion we made to them on the phone was that they include some context about what the device was. In other words, that it wasn't a Hillary Clinton device, but that it was the husband of a former aide or a former senior aide, right? And that was important for context, because if you don't put that context in there, it could be a notion that something was hidden from the investigators that only recently came to light, instead of suggesting that came in sideways. But they rejected that suggestion as well. I couldn't even read it, so maybe they were right. Because I think what our pitch to them on the call was like, you say you need to send this letter to correct the misimpression Congress has. You've got to make damn sure that by sending the letter, you don't just create a different misimpression. They ignored our two substantive suggestions. Those are the two I remember. And they sent the letter, I think, basically the way they had, and I didn't see the full text beforehand, but basically it was what sort of, at least the parts Baker had read to us on the phone, it was consistent with, I don't think they changed a word. Tosca said that the entire discussion about the contents of the letter was awkward, quote unquote, since the department, quote, opposed every aspect of this, unquote. Tosca stated, but I do remember, like at some point on our side, feeling like if you're going to say it, there's a natural way there's a way to just sort of lay it out a little bit more clearly that takes off some of the natural suspicions that are going to be created by less clear, less specific, and more ambiguous language. Toscas told us that he did not recall the FBI accepted any of the suggested edits provided by the department. Comey email to all FBI employees. At 3:08 p.m. on October 28, after news of the letter to Congress had been publicly reported, Comey sent the following message to all FBI employees. This morning I sent a letter to Congress in connection with the Secretary Clinton email investigation. Yesterday, the investigative team briefed me on their recommendation with respect to seeking access to emails that had previously been found in an unrelated case. Because those emails appear to be pertinent to our investigation, I agreed that we should take appropriate steps to obtain and review them. Of course, we don't ordinarily tell Congress about ongoing investigations, but here I feel an obligation to do so, given that I testified repeatedly in recent months that our investigation was completed. I also think it would be misleading to the American people who were not to supplement the record. At the same time, however, given that we don't know the significance of this newly discovered collection of emails, I don't want to create a misleading impression. In trying to strike a balance, In trying to strike a balance in a brief letter and in the middle of an election season, there is significant risk of being misunderstood, but I wanted you to hear directly from me about it. Analysis of the decision to send the October 28 letter. We found no evidence that Comey's decision to send the October 28 letter was influenced by political preferences. Instead, we found that his decision was the result of several interrelated factors that were connected to his concern that failing to send the letter would harm the FBI and his ability to lead it, and his view that candidate Clinton was going to win the presidency and that she would be perceived to be an illegitimate president if the public first learned of the information after the election. Although Comey told us that he, quote, didn't make this decision because he thought it would leak otherwise, several FBI officials, including Baker and Strzok, told us that the concern about leaks played a role in the decision. We concluded that in considering his choices, Comey failed to give adequate consideration to long-established department and FBI norms, policies, and expectations that he applied in other cases. Although we acknowledge that Comey faced a difficult situation with unattractive choices in proceeding as he did on October 28, Comey made a serious error of judgment. Okay, what time is it? Okay. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back with his July 5th announcement. We'll start there. It is 12:39 right now, Central Time, so it's 20 minutes to the hour. I'll take a 10-minute break. I'll be back at 10 minutes till, or 50 past the hour, depending on how you like to do your time. I will pause the stream. I won't kill it. I'll put the sign up, mute my mic, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. And we're back. All right, starting with the last paragraph there, or I should say the top paragraph. Much like with his July 5 announcement, Comey engaged in ad hoc decision-making based on his personal views, even if it meant rejecting long-standing department policy or practice. For example, we found unpersuasive Comey's explanation as to why transparency was more important than department policy and practice with regard to the reactivated mid-year investigation, while, by contrast, department policy and practice was more important to follow with regard to the Clinton Foundation and Russia investigations. Substantive assessment of Comey's decision, FBI and department norms and policies. Comey had ample guidance in long-standing department and FBI policies and norms regarding making public statements about pending investigations and taking actions that might affect elections. To start, the department and the FBI consistently declined to comment publicly or to Congress regarding ongoing investigative activity. The quote-unquote stay silent principle exists to protect the privacy and reputational interests of the subjects of the investigation, the right to a fair trial for those subsequently accused of crimes, the integrity of an ongoing investigation or pending litigation, and the department's ability to effectively administer justice without political or other undue outside influences. Comey endorsed this principle in general, stating, "I believe very strongly that our rule should be we don't comment on pending investigations." Excuse me. My wife's out of town and I need to make sure I check in on her, or that she can check in on me. I've had the phone on silent this whole time and I've missed several calls from her. This principle is embodied in several regulations and policies set forth in Chapter 2, including in policies regarding communications with Congress. Let's just skip that. There's a parenthesis there at the bottom. Although Congress has a clearly legitimate interest in determining how the department enforces statutes, congressional inquiries during the pendency of a matter pose an inherent threat to the integrity of the department's law enforcement and litigation functions. Okay, there's a rule that states which provides with respect to the release of information to the news media that where information relating to the circumstances of an investigation would be highly prejudicial, or where the release thereof would serve no law enforcement functions, such information should not be made public. In addition, the Department and the FBI have long observed a norm against taking an action during the run-up to an election that could impact an election. Although there is no codified 60-day rule, Comey acknowledged that he has consistently adhered to this quote-unquote take no action norm in the past. Quote, "I've lived my entire career in the Department of Justice under the norm, the principle that we, if at all possible, avoid taking any action in the run-up to an election, avoid taking any action that could have some impact, even if unknown, on an election, whether that's a dog catcher election or a president of the United States." Completely contradicts himself. He says one thing and does another. Given the lack of a written policy, we recommend that the department consider providing guidance to agents and prosecutors concerning the taking of overt investigative steps, indictments, public announcements, or other actions that could impact an election. Let it play out, then take your action ere it's over. There are ways to compensate. These policies and norms formed the fundamental backdrop for Comey's decision on October 28. Because of them, Comey's description of his choice as being between two doors, one labeled speak and the other labeled conceal, was a false dichotomy. The two doors were actually labeled follow policy practice and depart from policy practice. His task was not to conduct an ad hoc comparison of case-specific outcomes and risks. Rather, the burden was on him to justify an extraordinary departure from these established norms, policies, and precedent. Comey's justification for departing. Comey's justification for departing from established norms was that because he had previously told Congress and the public that the case was over, staying silent would be misleading. But it is hardly unique for the FBI to receive new information that might cause it to reactivate a previously closed or dormant investigation. To our knowledge, the FBI has not generally identified this circumstance as nullifying the stay silent principle. If you want to talk to someone who had a case that wasn't going anywhere and suddenly was reopened, look at Paul Manafort, who I think I just read has been sent to jail because the judge, I didn't read the whole thing, but I'm guessing the judge found Mueller's argument that Manafort had been tampering with witnesses just, and so revoked his bail and jailed him. Comey admitted that he had made no explicit promise to make a further announcement if new evidence were discovered. He stated instead that he had previously offered maximal transparency. Maximal? What's wrong with maximum? Because that, quote, enhances the credibility of the justice enterprise, unquote, and that maintaining that transparency required him to update his July statement in October. I think I forgot to add honey. If so, the problem originated with Comey's elevation of maximal transparency as a value overriding, for this case only, the principles of stay silent and take no action that the FBI has consistently applied to other cases. The Department and the FBI do not practice maximal transparency in criminal investigations. It is not a value reflected in the regulations, policies, or customs guiding FBI actions in pending criminal investigations. To the contrary, the guidance to agents and prosecutors is precisely the opposite. No transparency, except in rare and exceptional circumstances due to the potential harm to both the investigation and to the reputation of anyone under investigation. Well, Hillary's reputation was trashed, so I guess in this instance, that part doesn't apply. Comey told us that the potentially great evidentiary significance of the newly discovered emails would have made it particularly misleading to stay silent. But we found that the FBI's basis for believing, as of October 28, that the contents of the Weiner laptop would be significant to the Clinton email investigation was overestimated. Comey and others stated that they believed the Weiner laptop might contain the missing 3 months of Clinton's emails from the beginning of her tenure when she used a BlackBerry domain, and that these golden emails would be particularly probative of intent because they were close in time to when she set up her server. However, at the time of the October 28 letter, the FBI had limited information about the BlackBerry data that was on the laptop. The case agent assigned to the Weiner investigation stated only that he saw at least one BlackBerry pin message between Clinton and Abedin. As of October 28, no one with any knowledge of the Midyear investigation had viewed a single email message, and the Midyear team was uncertain that they would even be able to establish sufficient probable cause to obtain a search warrant. Even the description of the emails in the October 28 letter is at odds with Comey's emphasis on the importance of the discovery. The letter was edited to state that the emails appear to be pertinent because several members of the team objected to the words "are pertinent" as an unsupportable overstatement. Moreover, the Midyear team did not treat the BlackBerry emails as if they were critical to completing a thorough investigation prior to October. Rather, the team decided during the investigation not to obtain personal devices that Clinton's senior aides used for State Department work because, among other reasons, they did not believe obtaining those devices was necessary for a thorough investigation. Indeed, the Midyear team did not ask Abedin's attorneys to turn over Abedin's personal BlackBerry or laptop that she used during her employment at the State Department, even though Abedin told the FBI that she had given those devices to her attorneys so that they could produce her work-related emails to the State Department. Screw up after screw up. Before October 28, Comey lauded the thoroughness of the investigation and stated that declining prosecution was not a close call. If the vague and general information known about the laptop comments was sufficient to, quote, create a reasonable likelihood that will change our view of the case, then it is difficult to see how the investigation could have been as thorough as Comey represented, given the FBI's decision not to obtain similar devices from Clinton's senior aides prior to July 5th. Nor could the declination decision have been such an easy call if unseen emails to and from one of Clinton's aides could have resulted in a change in the department's prosecution assessment. In fact, as detailed in Chapter 9, every pertinent fact that the FBI knew about the laptop in October was already known in late September. Yet none of the Midyear investigators thought that these were, quote, golden emails, unquote, then a factor that contributed to the FBI's delay in acting on the information, as discussed in Chapter 9. In short, far too little was known about these emails in October 2016 to justify departing from department norms, policies, and precedent. Comey's comparison of risks and outcomes. Instead of referring to and being guided by long-standing department and FBI policies and precedent, Comey conducted an ad hoc comparison of the risks and outcomes associated with each option. He described the potential consequences concealing the existence of the emails as catastrophic to the FBI and the department because it would subject the FBI and the department to allegations that they had acted for political reasons to protect Hillary Clinton. Instead, Comey said he chose the option that he assessed as being just really bad. Replace bad with stupid. Even within the flawed analytical construct that Comey set up, he did not assess risks even-handedly. He assigned paramount significance to avoiding the reputational risk of staying silent, that he and the FBI would be unfairly accused of hiding the emails to protect candidate Clinton. But he appears to have placed no comparable value on the corresponding risk from making the public statement that he and the FBI would not only be accused of violating long-standing department and FBI policy and practice, but that he also would be unfairly accused of hyping the emails in a manner that hurt candidate Clinton. We believe that Comey's unequal assessment of these risks was the product of his belief that Clinton was going to win the election. Comey told us, "I am sure I was influenced by the tacit assumption that Hillary Clinton was sure to be the next president. This expectation likely led him to focus too heavily on what he perceived to be the consequences of not revealing the new information, namely undermining the legitimacy of Clinton's presidency and harming the reputation of the FBI. Ironically, in his effort to avoid the FBI or himself being seen as political, Comey based his decision in part on his assessment of the likely outcome of the political process. In our view, assumptions about the outcome of an election should not affect how the FBI or the department applies long-standing policies and norms. We believe that Comey underestimated his own ability to address the unfair criticism that he feared would ensue if he stayed silent. Comey acknowledged to us, "I've lived my entire career in the Department of Justice under the norm, the principle that we avoid taking any action that could have some impact, even if unknown, on an election." Thus, if Comey had chosen to have the FBI seek the search warrant but not send the October 28 letter, he would have a principled response if he was asked about his decision. Quote, "This is the way we always do it for the following good reasons," unquote. And he could have stated accurately and in good conscience, that he applied this principle even-handedly with respect to the Clinton email investigation and other pending FBI investigations. The FBI never commented publicly on the Russia investigation until after the election, and he refused to comment publicly about the Clinton Foundation investigation. An intelligence community statement, and earlier in October 2016, Comey declined on behalf of the FBI to participate in a U.S. intelligence community statement warning about Russian interference because, quote, "it exposes us to accusations of launching our own October surprise," unquote. Had he observed the same principle with respect to the Clinton email investigation, the even-handedness of his decisions would have been apparent. That changed the entire sentence. Indeed, much of the criticism that Comey received for not revealing before the election information about the Russia and Clinton Foundation investigations was due to the perceived lack of even-handedness given the disclosure he made on October 28 in the Clinton email investigation. In reaching our conclusion about the October 28 letter, we found the testimony of Deputy Assistant Attorney General George Toscas to be on point. One of the things that I tell people all the time after having been in the department for almost 24 years is I stress to people and people who work at all levels, the institution has principles and there's always an urge when something important or different pops up to say we should do it differently, or those principles or those protocols, we might want to deviate because this is so different. But the comfort that we get as people, as lawyers, as representatives, as employees, and as an institution, the comfort we get from those institutional policies, protocols, is an unbelievable thing through whatever storm, whatever storm hits us. And when you are within the norm of the way the institution behaves, you can weather any of it because you stand on the principle. And once you deviate, even in a minor way, you're always going to want to deviate. It's going to be something important and some big deal that makes you think, oh, let's do this a little differently. But once you do that, you have removed yourself from the comfort of saying this institution has a way of doing things, and then every decision is another ad hoc decision that may be informed by our policy and our protocol and principles, but it's never going to be squarely within them. Fear of leaks. And we're ragging on the New York office for possibly going to do that. Comey denied that a fear of leaks influenced his decision to send the October 28 letter to Congress. However, other witnesses told us that a concern about leaks played a role in the decision. As Baker stated, we were quite confident that if we don't put out a letter, somebody is going to leak it. That definitely was discussed. Numerous witnesses connected this concern about leaks specifically to NYO and told us that FBI leadership suspected that FBI personnel in NYO were responsible for leaks of information in other matters. Even accepting Comey's assertion that leaks played no role in his decision, we found that, at a minimum, a fear of leaks influenced the thinking of those who were advising him. We also note that these discussions on October 27 and 28 were occurring at almost the same time that FBI leadership was focused on how the Midyear investigation was being publicly portrayed. As detailed in Chapter 8, the FBI was devoting significant time and attention in October 2016 responding to both public and private criticism of the Midyear investigation. That included sending talking points to FBI SACs on October 21st for their use in responding to such criticism. Comey told us that these efforts were necessary to, quote, protect the credibility of the FBI in American life, unquote. As a result, at the time Comey was deciding whether to send the October 28 letter to Congress, the FBI had just 1 week earlier empowered its officials to speak publicly about the FBI's handling of the Midyear investigation. In our view, this confluence of events inevitably increased the risk of leaks. Lack of communication between Comey and department leadership. As we describe above, on October 27 and 28, Comey and Lynch decided not to speak to one another in person or by phone about the decision to notify Congress. Instead, Comey directed Rybicki to contact Axelrod, and the department decided to communicate its response entirely through Axelrod. Comey explained that he decided to ask Rybicki to contact Axelrod rather than speaking directly to Lynch or Yates because, quote, I didn't want to jam them, and I wanted to offer them the opportunity to think about and decide whether they wanted to be engaged in it. We asked Lynch and Yates why they did not call Comey or ask to meet with him after Rybicki's initial notification to Axelrod. Both Lynch and Yates told the OIG that they made an intentional strategic decision to handle discussions about the letter to Congress through Axelrod and Rybicki. Both Lynch and Yates explained that they were concerned that any direct discussion with Comey, particularly any discussion in which they told him not to send the letter, would be perceived as an attempt to prevent him fulfilling his, quote, personal ethical obligation, unquote, to notify Congress. Both stated that they were concerned that the fact of any such direct discussions would leak and would be portrayed as department leadership attempting to, quote, prevent information damaging to a candidate from coming out, Lynch, or strong-arming Comey, Yates. Lynch and Yates also told the OIG that a significant factor in their decision to handle communications through Rybicki and Axelrod was that direct discussions likely would have been ineffective. Lynch said the fact that Comey did not call her directly indicated that he did not want a real discussion and had already made up his mind to send a letter because he would call her to discuss other issues that were not resolved. Yates stated that, based on her experience with Comey, he was likely to push back hard against input from Lynch or her, especially if accepting their input meant that he had a right to go back to his staff and explain that he was reversing his decision based on their input. She told us that she believed strategically the best way to convince him not to send the letter was to allow him to come to that conclusion through discussions with his own staff, including Rybicki. Yates told us that she considered Rybicki to be his quote-unquote confidant, and the person that the department needed to convince to change Comey's mind in this situation. Comey's reaction to the input he received as the result of Rybicki's discussions with Axelrod suggests that these concerns were well-founded. While Comey stated that he welcomed the department's feedback, he did not take their feedback into account when Rybicki told him that the department recommended against the letter and thought it was a bad idea. When asked why he essentially ignored the advice of department leadership, Comey told us, "I thought the better view of it was that we had to send the letter. They were leaving it to me essentially, and I took it. I knew that I was alone at that point in time, but my view was, as between these two options, I disagree." Comey added that he felt that he gave Lynch and Yates the chance to engage, but they didn't wish to participate. "It's up to you, basically. I took that as, it's up to you. We don't think it's a good idea. We advise against it. I honestly thought they were taking kind of a cowardly way out." Although Comey told us that he would not have sent the October 28 letter had Lynch or Yates ordered him not to do it, we found no evidence that he or Rybicki ever conveyed this to department leadership. Both Lynch and Yates cited Comey's description of his personal ethical obligation to notify Congress and his concerns about the, quote, survivability, unquote, of failing to do so as reasons that they believed a direct order would be ineffective. As described above, Axelrod told the OIG that they considered 3 possible negative outcomes should Lynch order Comey not to send the letter. Comey could obey, and Lynch would be accused of obstructing Congress. Comey could ignore the order and send the letter anyway, and department leadership would have to fire him, and Comey could resign. Axelrod told us none of these are good for the institutions. None of these are good for the policies and the procedures or the sort of the goals of keeping DOJ and FBI out of politics. None of those are good for the AG personally. We acknowledge that Comey, Lynch, and Yates faced difficult choices in late October 2016. However, we found it extraordinary that Comey assessed that it was best that the FBI director not speak directly with the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General about how to best navigate this most important decision and mitigate the resulting harms, and that Comey's decision resulted in the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General concluding that it would be counterproductive to speak directly to the FBI director. We believe that open and candid communication among leaders in the department and its components is essential for the effective functioning of the department. Chapter 11. Completion of the investigation. The October 30, 2016 search warrant. The FBI obtained a search warrant for the Midyear related material on the Wiener laptop on October 30, 2016. The search warrant authorized the FBI to search for 4 categories of information on the laptop: data and information associated with the operations, use, maintenance, backup, auditing, and security functions of the subject laptop, data and information electronically stored on the subject laptop related to communications with email accounts used by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during her tenure as Secretary of State, data and information on the subject laptop that might identify the person or persons who had accessed classified information present on the subject laptop, and data and information on the subject laptop that might identify activity related to a computer intrusion. We discussed the Midyear's team's decision to seek a search warrant rather than using consent to review the laptop below. We also discussed the narrow factual basis for the search warrant that the Midyear team included in the application and compared the Wiener laptop with the treatment of other devices during the main part of the Midyear investigation. Decision not to seek consent from Abedin and Wiener before seeking a warrant. Prosecutor 1 told us that there was, quote, some discussion, unquote, of getting consent from Wiener and Abedin to search the laptop. However, Prosecutor 1 stated that consent from both was needed, and at that point, the Midyear team's understanding was that Wiener was inaccessible because he was at a location where he did not have access to electronic devices. Prosecutor 1 continued. Prosecutor 1 continued, and there was some concern about Wiener's attorney gladly providing consent but wanting something from SDNY for it, and our horse trading on conduct was that was egregious, and doing something for purposes of our case didn't seem to make much sense. I think the decision was made not to seek consent from either attorney and to get a warrant. Prosecutor 1 told us that he believed both the FBI and department agreed with the decision to seek a search warrant rather than consent to access Wiener laptop. Baker agreed that they did not want to try to deal with Wiener or his attorney, but also provided an additional explanation for not seeking consent. Baker stated, I think we were concerned about being too prolonged and dragged out. I think that reflects some of our frustration with what happened previously in the investigation. We're trying to get consent, and those kinds of discussions were long and drawn out. And we were just like, screw it, we're not going to deal with that. We're just going to get a damn search warrant. We're not going to let DOJ take us down that road. We're just going to get a search warrant. And in this case, we've got SDNY, and we think they'll be aggressive, and they'll get it. After reviewing a draft of this report, Toscas and other prosecutors noted that SDNY played no substantive role in the October 30 search warrant. Incredible. Factual basis of the October 30 search warrant application. The factual basis for the October 30 search warrant application, which was prepared by the Midyear team, contains little information about what the NYO case agent had seen on the Wiener laptop and the importance of that information to the Midyear investigation. The entirety of the search warrant application that discussed what had been seen on the Wiener laptop stated, in executing the search of the subject laptop, pursuant to the search warrant issued on September 26, 2016, FBI agents sorted the emails on the subject laptop to segregate emails within the scope of the warrant from those outside of it. As a result, the FBI reviewed non-content header information for emails on the subject laptop to facilitate its research. In so doing, the FBI observed non-content header information indicating that thousands of emails of Wiener's then-wife Uma resided on the subject laptop. Because Abedin's emails were outside the scope of the September 26 search warrant, the FBI did not review the content of those emails. The non-content header information that FBI agents reviewed on the subject laptop indicated that the emails on the subject laptop included emails sent and or received by Abedin at her @clintonemail.com account and at a Yahoo email account appearing to belong to Abedin, as well as correspondence between one or both of these accounts and State Department email accounts during and around Abedin's tenure at the State Department. The FBI's investigation of the improper transmission and storage of classified material. Sorry, I passed out. The FBI's investigation of the improper transmission and storage of classified information on unclassified email systems and servers has established that emails containing classified information were transmitted through multiple email accounts used by Abedin, including her @clintonemail.com and Yahoo email accounts. The FBI's investigation determined that Abedin, using her various email accounts, typically communicated with Clinton's @clintonemail.com account on a daily basis. Analysis of emails in the FBI's possession revealed that there were more than 4,000 work-related emails between Abedin and Clinton from 2009 to 13. The FBI's investigation established that 27 email chains containing classified information as determined by the relevant original classification authorities have been transmitted through Aberdeen's Clinton email and or Yahoo accounts. Out of the 27 email chains, 6 email chains contained information that was classified at the secret level at the time the emails were sent, and information in 4 of those email chains remains classified at that level now, while 2 email chains contained information that is currently classified at the confidential level. At the confidential level at the time the emails were sent. And of those 21 email chains, excuse me, what are you doing? Information in the remaining 21 email chains was classified at the confidential level at the time the emails were sent. And of those 21 email chains, information in 16 of them remains classified as confidential. Given the information indicating that there are thousands of Aberdeen's emails located on the subject laptop, including emails during and around Aberdeen's tenure at the State Department from Aberdeen's @Clinton email account, as well as a Yahoo account appearing to belong to Aberdeen, and the regular email correspondence between Aberdeen and Clinton, there is probable cause to believe that the subject laptop contains correspondence between Aberdeen and Clinton during their time at the State Department, because it has been determined by relevant original classification authorities that many emails were exchanged between Aberdeen using her @ClintonEmail.com and or Yahoo accounts, and Clinton believed that Clinton contained classified information. There is also probable cause to believe that the correspondence between them located on the subject laptop contains classified information. Noticeably absent from the search warrant application prepared by the Midyear team is both any mention that the NYO agent had seen Clinton emails on the laptop and any mention of the potential presence of BlackBerry emails from early in Clinton's tenure. In explaining the absence of this information, Strzok stated, "I think what we were trying to do was establish as tightly as we could the fact that we believed, because I think the basis of the probable cause was that there was classified information on there. I think it, as that narrative, was not designed to tell the whole story. That narrative was designed to demonstrate to the magistrate that we have probable cause that there was evidence of a crime on there." We also asked Prosecutor 1 about the factual statement of probable cause outlined in the search warrant. Prosecutor 1 stated, "The probable cause was basically that Uma Aberdeen had an email account. That email account communicated with email accounts where classified information was there. Classified information made it into Uma's email accounts. We believe information from those email accounts is on this computer belonging to her husband based upon whatever we could describe about what that agent saw, which we had to characterize very carefully, and so that what tethered it to the computer was basically what an agent saw during a search warrant from another case. That's the quote-unquote probable cause." We asked Prosecutor 1 if there was any discussion of putting in information relating to the BlackBerry emails from early in Clinton's tenure. Prosecutor 1 stated, "I don't think so. If it would have helped the probable cause, I would have put it in. I don't think we had strong enough basis to do that, or I would have put it in, I'm sure. We would have anything that we could have put in there that was true and would have bolstered the probable cause, we would have put in." We also reviewed the factual basis of the October 30 search warrant application with the NYO case agent for the Wiener investigation. The case agent told us that each of the facts related to the Wiener laptop that were included in the search warrant application were known to him within a day or two of September 26. We asked Comey for his reaction to the statement that, quote, "every fact in the October 30 search warrant was known to the FBI at the highest levels, at least to the deputy director level, on September 28. Comey responded, "My reaction is that it should have moved faster and that I'd want to know, to answer this, I'm asking, but what would be their motives to delay? Differences in approach to devices during the main investigation. As noted previously, Comey's decision on October 27 to have the FBI seek a search warrant for the Wiener laptop generated discussion among the Midyear team about how that approach differed from the approach that the Midyear team agreed upon and took during the investigation, namely to only seek Clinton's personal electronic devices and not to seek the personal electronic devices of any of her aides. In addition, in drafting the search warrant application for the Wiener laptop, a discussion occurred regarding the scope of the requested search warrant and whether it should be limited to emails between Clinton and Abedin or whether it should include all of Abedin's emails. Emails from the night of October 29 show that Baker expressed concerns that the draft search warrant request was too narrow. Specifically, in an email at 9:13 p.m. to FBI Attorney 1, Strzok, and Anderson, Baker stated, the main question I have right now is why we are only seeking access to emails between Uma and Clinton. Based on the facts set forth about Uma mishandling classified information on all of her accounts, it seems to me there is probable cause to look at all of her emails, no matter who the other party. Am I misreading the scope of the warrant or the strength of the probable cause? Strzok responded to Baker's email at 9:28 a.m. stating, I think the primary deficiency in trying to go after Uma's own communications is that Uma's role and expertise was far more administrative in nature than that of the other close aides to Clinton. That is, when it claimed to classified information, she was primarily a conduit to from others to Clinton, not a generator of such information discussion on her own. Whereas Sullivan or Mills had substantive and sometimes classified discussions on their own, absent Clinton's participation. Abedin's were largely as an administrative conduit to the Secretary. Thus, it's more challenging to articulate an expectation at the level of probable cause that we'd expect to find classified in her discussions not involving Clinton. We can't exclude it, but it's challenging. FBI Attorney 1 responded to Strzok's email at 9:55 p.m. stating, that's right, Pete, plus we can't say she mishandled on all of her accounts. Of the 27 classified emails, 26 were on her @clintonemail.com account and one was Yahoo. We also cannot say for certain that the 27 classified emails are on this particular device, which also weakens our argument generally. In response, Baker sent an email at 10:18 p.m. stating, there is probable cause to believe that Uma used her email accounts to mishandle classified information. I just don't understand why that is not enough to look at all her emails. Would you please discuss with DOJ? Baker told us that he believed the FBI should just seek the authority to review all of Abedin's emails on the laptop. Good luck. Instead of just emails between Abedin and Clinton. FBI Attorney 1 told us that she recalled Baker wanting the search warrant to be broader, and in an email on October 29, FBI Attorney 1 stated that Baker's point is there could be relevant emails that are not between UMA and HRC, particularly regarding intent. At 11:06 p.m. on October 29, FBI Attorney 1 sent Prosecutor 1 and Prosecutor 2 an email informing them of Baker's concern and adding, I understand that the scope of our consensual searches has been limited to emails with Clinton, but the purpose of our investigation was to look for a classified information that transited the server, which would include UMA's @Clinton email. I honestly can't remember how we treated those when we got consent for the second server, and I don't have the letter in front of me. Prosecutor 1 responded at 11:12 p.m. We did not look through all of UMA's emails before we searched for Clinton's addresses, but did not go through all of her emails. We can discuss, but that seems like a pretty big push. We only use examples of communication is with Clinton to establish probable cause for 793 offenses. 5 minutes later, at 11:17 p.m., FBI Attorney 1 responded, I honestly couldn't remember how we treated UMA @Clinton emails before, given sounds like limiting the search to Clinton communications is consistent. FBI Attorney 1 told the OIG that the department didn't believe that we had probable cause to be broader than that. Baker stated that someone at either the department or SDNY pushed back and said no, we don't have probable cause for that. We asked the prosecutors about this issue. Prosecutor 1 told us that he felt Prosecutor 1 told us that he felt we needed to treat Uma like we treated her earlier on in the investigation. Prosecutor 1 told us that it did not make sense to expand the bounds of what they had done before reviewing the Wiener laptop. Prosecutor 2 also noted this, stating, and then there was also the issue of we didn't look at everyone's emails over the course of this investigation. We had Uma's, some of Uma's ClintonEmail.com emails on the server. And we never got consent or a search warrant to look through Uma's emails on the server because, the judgment was made that not so significant to the investigation. So I think from DOJ perspective, we were kind of confused why this was such a significant development. During this debate with FBI on October 29, Prosecutor 1 sent an email to Tosca stating, word that Baker and higher-ups over there, or people in the chain, are going to say DOJ was standing in their way. It just seems to me that they are pushing the bounds here all of a sudden when they didn't do so before. We asked Prosecutor 1 about this email. Prosecutor 1 stated that part of his concern was frustration at FBI for requesting the search warrant be completed immediately, yet trying to suggest major changes after it was substantially completed. Prosecutor 1 stated that he also felt it didn't make a lot of sense for the purpose of probable cause to talk about hypothetical conversations that could have occurred in order to expand the bounds of what we're trying to do with the search warrant. Lynch-Comey meeting on October 31. On Monday, October 31, Lynch requested a private conversation with Comey after the regularly scheduled Monday morning meeting between the department and the FBI. Yates told us that she and Lynch had talked about this meeting beforehand, and that Lynch told Yates that Lynch planned to make 2 points to Comey. The October 28th letter was a blunder, and that Comey and the FBI needed to process the Wiener laptop as fast as you can. We asked Comey about this meeting. Comey stated, so the two of us went into the AG's private office, and I went over to sit in a chair, and she closed the door and turned around and started walking at me with her head down and her arms out, and came up to me because I'm so ridiculously tall, and pressed her face against my solar plexus, and wrapped her arms around me and hugged me, and then I kind of awkwardly, I'm not a hugger because I'm a giraffe, and so I kind of patted the Attorney General back, and then the embrace. She broke the embrace and then said, I just wanted to give you a hug. That's sweet. And that's pretty pathetic. I can't even drink without spilling it on myself. And then she went over and sat down. And then she said, how are you doing? I said, I'm doing okay. I said, look, this is really bad, but the alternative is worse. And then she said, yeah, would they feel better if it had leaked on November 6th? And I just said, exactly, Loretta. Because I hadn't made the disclosure to Congress because of the leaks, the prospect of leaks, but it actually consoled me because really, you're not that important because even if you hadn't sent a letter to Congress, which was the right thing to do, it probably would have leaked anyway that you were going for a search warrant on this stuff, and she obviously saw it in the same way and said, right, would they feel better if it had leaked on November 6th? I think she said, and I said, exactly. And then she said a nice thing. I hope you're holding up. And then she said, so we get up and start walking to the door. She's in front of me, and then she turns around and says, try to look beat up. And so then she opens the door, we walk out, her staff is all out in the hallway, and I walk out. And then somebody puts it out within moments that Attorney General had taken me aside to give me a woodshedding or something. It was the media, I think, that morning, so she and I never spoke about that again. But I reasonably understood that her saying you did the right thing, and even if you hadn't sent the letter, it would have come out anyway, and that would have been even worse. And so I think that's the end of the story. We also asked Lynch about this meeting. Lynch told us the reason she called the one-on-one meeting with Comey was primarily because she wanted to talk to him about leaks, and she was concerned that Comey didn't want to talk about it in front of a larger group. Lynch stated, "We went into a smaller room, and as I recall, we were both sitting down, and I recall saying we have to talk about this letter and the aftermath of it. But I don't recall my exact words, but I remember saying, I know that you were aware that I did not think you should do this, but it is done now, and we have to deal with the aftermath of it. And I said, this has not followed what was at least conveyed to me you thought you were going to do. And I made the point that it was immediately described as the investigation was reopened, the full investigation was reopened. And he said, I was very clear, I was careful not to say that, and I had heard, over the weekend that he had been surprised or disappointed, or perhaps both, that the letter was being characterized in that way, because that was not what he wanted to say, nor what he intended to say. And because I understand that that wasn't your intention, but that's how it was taken. I said, in many ways, it's the exact opposite of what you wanted to have happen. And I said, and I think it's caused a huge problem for the department because we have the perception now that we are essentially trying to harm one of our candidates. I'm sorry. And I raised the possibility. I said, I think you ought to think about sending another letter, a clarifying letter. You've already done this now. You have created a misimpression as to what is going on. You need to clarify this and say that essentially you want to make it clear that this is not a reopening of an investigation. That should be conveyed in there somewhere. And he said, how would you phrase that? And I said, I have not put pen to paper. I have not wordsmithed this one. And I said, and I don't think it should come from me. It needs to come from you because you gave the initial letter. I said, if it comes from me, then we are essentially talking about internal DOJ fights and disagreements and everything. And he said that's throwing more politics into the public arena that shouldn't be there. He said, I agree with you on that. He said, I'll think about that. I'll think about that. At some point, I said, it's clear to me that we're going to have to do some statement at the end of the forensic analysis. It could be part of that, or you could do it today. I said, but I really think you need to clarify this. And he said, I hear you, which is a phrase that Comey uses a lot, I hear you. And he said, I will give that a great deal of thought. And he said, my concern is, and again, I don't recall the exact words, but he said, I have a concern that it would do more harm than good at this point. And I said, okay, well, let's think about what it would look like. The other issue I raised with him, I said, look, I've known you for a long time. You and the department, you and I have been in the department a long time. I said, my view is you would never have done something like this if you didn't feel tremendous pressure to do it. And I said, and I don't understand that pressure. I said, but it was conveyed to me that you were very concerned about leaks specifically. And I said, I can only assume that you were thinking of leaks, and that would have been of this information in a much, much worse way. And he said, you're right, you're exactly right about that. Now, I knew that the laptop had been handed out in a case of New York. And so I said, we have to talk about the New York office and the concern that both you and I have expressed about leaks in the past. And I said, do you think that this was the right way to deal with the issue, the concern about leaks? He didn't have much of a response, but we were having a conversation. And I said, I've talked to you and I've talked about that before. But McCabe and I have talked about them before. And then I said, now, we've got to talk about the New York office in general. And he said, yes. And I said, we both work with them. We both know them. We both, think highly of them. I said, but this has become a problem. And he said to me that it had become clear to him. He didn't say over the course of what investigation or whatever. He said, it's clear to me that there is a cadre of senior people in New York who have a deep and visceral hatred of Secretary Clinton. And he said, it is deep. And he said it was surprising to him or stunning to him. I didn't get the impression that he was agreeing with all of it, by the end of the way, but he was still saying it did exist and it was hard to manage because these were agents that were very, very senior or had even timed out and were staying on and therefore did not really feel under pressure from headquarters or anything to that effect. And I said, I'm aware of that. I said I wasn't aware it was to this level and the steps you're talking about, but I said I'm sad to see that this does not surprise me. Sorry, sad to say this does not surprise me. And he made a comment about, you understand that. A lot of people don't understand that. You get that issue. I said I get that issue. I said I'm just troubled that this issue, meaning the New York issue, the New York agent issue and leaks, I am troubled that this issue has put us where we are today with respect to this laptop. He said again, I hear you. I will think about that. I will consider what to do. He said again, I'm concerned that another letter right now that isn't tied to a resolution of the forensics would just be pouring more. He didn't say more fuel on the fire, but that the phraseology, something like that he used. And I said, all right. I said, well, let me know what you decide about whether to do something else or not, particularly as we go through the process of finding things out. Lynch told us that she was sure she asked Comey if he was okay, and that she may have hugged him because she often did. Lynch also stated that as they departed the room, she joked with Comey and had said something like, of course, you're going to look like I beat you up. Overall, Lynch described the conversation as friendly, but tough conversation given the seriousness and significant issues involved. Okay, just so you know, I'm going to go another 19 minutes, and then I'll cut the stream and then restart it once YouTube stops pinging it, and we'll have a fresh cut. So again, I'm going to stop when the timer reads 4 hours or thereabouts, and then I'll cut the live stream. We'll take a 15-minute break this time, and then I'll be back. Lynch's chief of staff stated that Lynch told her about the conversation with Comey afterwards. Lynch's chief of staff stated, Lynch said the director had expressed that he needed to send the letter because he was very concerned about leaks, that it was going to leak out anyway, that they had found these emails in relation to the Weiner investigation. She may have told me something else, but I don't remember. I remember that being the big thing that he had focused on. We also reviewed McCord's notes of a meeting she attended with Lynch on October 31, after Lynch's meeting with Comey, in which the mid-year investigation was discussed. The notes reflect that Lynch stated the following. Good vehicle for more clarifying STMT. Sorry. Got lost on my buttons. Good vehicle for more clarifying STMT. Statement. Need to correct misimpressions out there. Told director this morning and he wanted to think about it. Could recap where we were at the end of last week and talk about process without details of what we're finding. We'll continue our review and take appropriate inventory steps should come from Comey to clarify what he said Friday. FBI review of Weiner's laptop emails. Yeah, definitely forgot the honey. Midyear agents obtained a copy of the Weiner laptop from NYO immediately after the search warrant was signed on October 30. The laptop was taken directly to Quantico, where the FBI's Operational Technology Division, OTD, began processing the laptop. The lead analyst told us that given the volume of emails on the laptop and the difficulty with deduplicating the emails, that at least for the first few days, the scale of what we're doing seemed really, really big. Strzok told us that OTD was able to do some amazing things to rapidly reduplicate the emails on the laptop, which significantly lowered the number of emails that the mid-year team would have to individually review. Strzok stated that only after that technological breakthrough did he begin to think it was possible we might wrap up before the election. FBI leadership, including Comey, was briefed on an almost daily basis during the review process. The lead analyst told us that he recalled briefing Comey on Friday, November 4, stating, I told Comey, I said, I think there is a possibility we may be able to get through this before the end of the weekend. So he said, if you think you can do it, you should try to. So that's what we did. we basically put in all the Saturdays, so that's what we did. We brought in, we basically put all hands on deck for that Saturday. The mid-year team flagged all potentially work-related emails encountered during the review process and compared those to emails that they had previously reviewed in other data sets. Any work-related emails that were unique, meaning that they did not appear in any other data set, were individually reviewed by the lead analyst, Strzok, and FBI Attorney 1 for evidentiary value. Analysts on the mid-year team subsequently drafted a document summarizing the review of the Wiener laptop entitled Anthony Wiener Laptop Review for Communications Pertinent to Mid-Year Exam. This document, dated 15 November 2016, showed that the full image of the laptop contained approximately 1,335,980 items or files. According to the document, FBI OTD initially extracted approximately 350,000 emails from the laptop and then approximately 344,000 BlackBerry backup files. The FBI determined that 4 of the 13 BlackBerry backups were assessed to belong to Abedin. The remaining 9 BlackBerry backups were associated with Wiener. The FBI only reviewed emails to or from Clinton during the period in which she was Secretary of State, not emails from Abedin to other instructions that all I was allowed to, and not emails from Abedin to other parties or emails outside that period. Analyst once stated, I had very strict instructions that all I was allowed to do within the case was look for Hillary Clinton emails because that was the scope of our work. Utilizing various searches targeting Clinton's emails, the FBI reviewed in full approximately 48,982 items on the Wiener laptop. The FBI ultimately identified 13 classified email chains, the content of which was duplicative of emails previously recovered during the investigation. None of these emails were marked classified, but 4 of the 13 were classified as secret at the time sent, and 9 were classified confidential at the time sent. The FBI determined that Abedin forwarded 2 of the confirmed classified emails to Wiener. The FBI reviewed 6,827 emails that were either to or from Clinton and assessed 3,077 of those emails to be potentially work-related. The FBI analysis of the review noted that because metadata was largely absent, the emails could not be completely automatically deduplicated or evaluated against prior emails recovered during the investigation, and therefore the FBI could not determine how many of the potentially work-related emails were duplicative of emails previously obtained in the mid-year investigation. Agent 1 instant messages from November 1. On November 1, Agent 1 and an FBI agent uninvolved in the mid-year investigation exchanged the following instant messages on the FBI's computer network. The sender of each message is identified after the timestamp. Okay, it goes from 8:31 to 8:37. Uninvolved agent. A horrible shit sandwich. Still no grand jury, I imagine. So you find Uma lied. Big fucking deal. No one at DOJ is going to prosecute. Agent 1, Raj, no one is going to prosecute even if we find unique classified. Grand jury story was inaccurate. 50 plus grand jury subpoenas and 273D issued. Agent 1, we only had several warrants and a lot of consent searches on media. I would have liked to use warrants for all because the consent agreements had limited scope. Reasonable scope, but I don't like to stand on the lawn and have the occupants throw out the evidence to us. That's an interesting phrase. When we asked Agent 1 about these messages, Agent 1 told us that this was another example of a friend reaching out to him about the status of the mid-year investigation. Agent 1 continued, I think to what I've said before. I think this is me venting or complaining in a vein of, but I have nothing to substantiate. I don't have a statement. I don't have an action that someone wouldn't prosecute it if we found it. We asked Agent 1 about his explanation at the time of what would be found on the Wiener laptop and how that could impact the mid-year investigation. Agent 1 said, I think my feelings at the time was there was a really good chance we'd find emails we hadn't seen before, that there might not be something that could potentially be classified, but would it be so much different than what we had already seen? In my impression, would probably be no. Comey letter to Congress on November 8. On the afternoon of November 3, the FBI began drafting what ultimately became Comey's letter to Congress, announcing that the FBI had completed its review of the emails to or from Clinton that were on the Weiner laptop. That work was completed very early on November 6th. Later that same day, Comey sent his second letter to Congress, which we provided as Attachment F. The letter stated, I write to supplement my October 2016 letter that notified you the FBI would be taking additional investigative steps with respect to former Secretary of State Clinton's use of a personal email server. Since my letter, the FBI investigative team has been working around the clock to process and review a large volume of emails from a device obtained in connection with an unrelated criminal investigation. During that process, we reviewed all of the communications that were to or from Hillary Clinton while she was Secretary of State. Based on our review, we have not changed our conclusions that we expressed in July with respect to Secretary Clinton. I am very grateful to the professionals at the FBI for doing an extraordinary amount of high-quality work in a short period of time. Comey told us that he met with the Midyear team after they finished the review of the emails on the Weiner laptop and, quote, went through what they had done, what they had found, what their conclusion was, it does not change our view with respect to Hillary Clinton, end quote. Comey stated that there was more work to be done with respect to Abedin and Weiner to understand how the emails ended up on Weiner's computer, but that the review was complete with respect to Clinton. Comey continued, and then I said, okay, basically convince me you've done it well. Once convinced, Comey stated, I said, okay, now we're done. We should notify Congress that we are done. And then we set to work on that. Comey stated that Steinbach opposed the idea of a second letter. Comey explained. And Steinbach's view was, I think it's too late for that. As I recall it, that we've created a storm, and if you try to undo the storm now, you'll simply feed the storm more or something. So words to that effect. I said, look, I respect that view, but I think you're wrong. I think having spoken, that led us to having to speak. Having spoken, we need to, in fairness, say that we're done. You've done well. You've been able to do it in time. Since we are shared that also with DOJ, so then we shared that also with DOJ, got feedback, and then sent that letter. And again, the goal there was to be as fair as possible while still accomplishing the goal of telling them that we finished with respect to her. Steinbach told us that he could not recall the specifics of the debate about the November 6th letter, but stated, I think maybe the November 6th one, I was thinking, look, it's already done, just let it go, let it die. I can't remember. The lead analyst told us that he raised objections to the November 6th letter during discussions with Comey. The lead analyst stated, I said I could understand the first statement because we were reopening an investigation. We were correcting the record. But I said I don't agree with that this time. We haven't any obligation to do that because the investigation isn't done. We have additional investigative steps that are going to happen. We're not closed in the sense of being closed. We may have come to a position of understanding about what's on the laptop, but to me, that same obligation, which to me is what drove us to make the first statement, does not exist now. The lead analyst told us that the further investigative steps needed to complete the investigation included at least a malware analysis to examine the laptop for intrusion and a re-interview of Abedin. Abedin was in fact re-interviewed by the FBI on January 6, 2017. With regards to the malware analysis, the lead analyst explained. The way I explain this in my thinking is, again, from my counterintelligence perspective, one of the key questions you're trying to answer to any of these circumstances, especially when you've been confirmed that classified information is resident on a device that it shouldn't be, is did that device get compromised by anyone? That's a part of the equation of was this a significant or negative impact to U.S. national security. If it's simply on Weiner's laptop and that's where it ended, then that's one thing. It's another thing, though, if through this their actions got on Weiner's laptop and a foreign power obtained those classified, that's a separate issue. So to me, that's not That's not an insignificant aspect of this that was still completely unresolved at the time. The lead analyst stated, then ultimately the director looked at me and he thanked me and thanked everybody for our candor as always. And he said, but I have decided we're going to do it. We're going to make it. You know, the statement, and that's kind of it. At 7:52 p.m. on November 5th, Page sent a text message to Strzok that stated, I don't want to make a statement anymore. Strzok responded at 7:58 p.m. stating in part, yeah, I don't either. We're kind of out of the news cycle. Let's leave it that way. At 8:11 a.m. on November 6th, Page sent another text message to Strzok that stated, I still don't know that we should make this statement. Strzok immediately responded, I don't know either. I am SG. I don't know what that means. After being shown these text messages, Strzok stated that he thought the decision to send the November 6th letter was easier than the decision about the October 28 letter. However, Strzok stated that he was concerned that every time the FBI acted, it invigorated the news cycle. We also asked Strzok and Page about their use of iMessage, a built-in instant message service on Apple devices. As described in more detail in Chapter 12, Strzok and Page told us that they mostly used iMessage and personal email for personal use. However, Strzok told us he could not exclude the possibility that he sent work-related information over iMessage. I can't say they rushed this, but the mistakes that are in here are pretty easily noticed. They should have had one more pass over this. If there was only a syntax program, although I use Grammarly, and that catches a lot of stuff, but maybe they can't use that on government property. I don't know. However, Strzok stated that he was concerned, as described in more detail in Chapter 12, Strzok and Page told us that they mostly used iMessage and personal email for personal use. However, Strzok could not exclude the possibility he sent work-related information over iMessage. Similarly, Page told us that references to these other forums reflected mostly personal use as opposed to using them for work purposes. However, she stated that she and Strzok sometimes used these forums for work-related discussions due to the technical limitations of FBI-issued phones. Unlike the October 28 letter, the FBI sent a draft copy of the November 6 letter to the department, and the department participated meaningfully in the drafting process. Axelrod stated that he insisted upon seeing the letter, and he, along with Toscas and Associate Deputy Attorney General, General Scott Schools, provided comments and edits. Okay, 3:57:27 seconds. Close enough. Chapter 12. We are getting there, folks. We are getting there. Okay. Again, I'm going to, this time, I'm going to kill the stream, restart it, so you'll be able to just log back in again. I'm not changing the location of the stream or anything like that. It'll still be on the channel, so you can log back in. I'm going to take a 15-minute break, grab a little lunch. I know it's late, but I have to. And then we'll be back, and we'll continue on. So, thank you, and I'll see you in 15 minutes.